Hello, everyone. Right, you can see everyone because I'm having a lovely chat with. Do you want me to call you Lloyd?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Right, okay, from the YouTube channel Lindybeige. Chris, who is an artist, and they're both working on a graphic novel called In Search of Hannibal. I've already backed it, and it's not actually it's not actually underfunded. It's actually almost 4 times overfunded. So this isn't necessarily like a raw drive for money or anything. I'm genuinely interested in this, and I'm really looking forward to talking about this. But there is a link in the description if you want to go and check it out. So yeah, Lloyd and Chris, how are you doing, guys?
Good.
Well, I think I'm all right.
Glad to hear it.
Wonderful.
I see that Chris is joining the Beard Club. This is new.
I am. I'm giving it a go. Yeah. I don't know if it's a success or not. It takes a while. It's a good 2 months, you know.
You've got dark hair. It's easy for you.
Yes. So what you're saying, it's an inferior beard then?
Up close, it's a mess. It's it's if I swish it this way, it just gets all patchy and stuff. Yeah, it's.
It's got the comic book artist look. I think you're carrying it off.
I like the T-shirt. That is a good T-shirt, Chris.
Thank you.
So how did this project come about then? Because when I first saw it, I was very excited because I really liked the idea of a graphic novel of Hannibal's life. I mean, not only am I going to enjoy that, but I want to see that existing as well. So how did you guys come about doing this project?
Well, really, it started with Chris. Yes, Chris got in touch with me. I was expecting him to dive in there, but since he didn't,
I just want to create awkward moments. That's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, he got in touch with me saying, would I be interested in being the historical consultant on a project of his, which was a graphic novel about the Second Punic War. And I said, oh, I'm not actually much of an expert on Carthaginians exactly. I did Roman archaeology, I did Greek archaeology, but I didn't do any Carthaginian. But yes, I could possibly help. And we arranged a Skype session, and how long did that first Skype session last? At least 2 hours, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was a marathon, and but it was a lot of fun because it was like finally, I don't know, I could just feel it percolating right away, right off the bat. So it felt good. There was that nice kind of chemistry there, and I think we chatted for probably 3 or 4 hours. It was a long time.
And he said that he had this idea and he was wanting to do it this way, and I just started firing ideas. Oh, how about this? How about this? How about this? And I just sort of fired loads of ideas, and presumably he thought that at least some of them were borderline acceptable. And I think it was within 2 hours of that Skype session, he wrote an email to me saying, "Do you know what? How about you write it?" And eek, I thought, blimey. All right then.
Do you have any experience of writing?
I've never written a graphic novel. No, I've done very, very short comic strips, and I've done stage plays, but never a graphic novel. No.
Okay. Then, yeah, Chris, why did you choose the life of Hannibal?
I don't know what originally sparked the whole Hannibal thing, but I think it was sometime around 2001, maybe. I sort of stumbled upon, got interested in the story, and it just seemed like it had everything. Just the Hannibal, the Scipio thing, the two sides of the same coin, all this kind of stuff. And there's really no protagonist or antagonist. It's just such an interesting time in history, and there's so much kind of hanging in the balance. And visually, there's so much great stuff. I mean, you've obviously got the elves and all that, but it's just, it has everything that you could want in an amazing story. And looking around, whether it's comics or movies or whatever, nobody's touched it. Or at least, I don't know, at least nobody's done anything that interesting with it.
Yeah, what happened to the Vin Diesel movie that was supposed to be coming out?
I don't know. What happened to Vin Diesel?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I guess he did. I guess he did like the Fast and Furious thing. But yeah, I mean that's the thing too. Like I would hear things like that and I think, there you go. Okay, Vin Diesel's gonna do it, and that would actually kind of discourage me all the time because I'd hear these like rumors that it's gonna get made into a movie, and I'd kind of be like, someone else is gonna do it, and then there's gonna be like the Marvel version or the Image version or whatever. There's gonna be these incarnations of the story, and I'll just be sort of throwing my thing onto the pile. So I didn't really it was always there, but I just never like did it. And for some reason, when I moved back to Germany like 9 months ago or so, I just thought like, okay, I'm here. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the Hannibal thing. I'd been a fan of Lindybeige for a while, and I just thought, man, I need a guy like this. I need a Lindybeige. I gotta find this guy. And it's like, shit, why don't I just contact him and see if he'd be interested in helping? And then I kind of looked into him more and more and more, and it's like, oh, this is a really creative dude. This is like a really talented, artistically minded guy who, I think a big thing too was seeing your Iliad video.
Oh no, I didn't. No, I hadn't made that yet.
Was it after?
The video you said was the Ivanhoe video that you watched.
Oh yeah, there was that one. Yeah. But I think, I don't know. To me, it's I don't know if it's what the timeline is exactly, but definitely seeing things like your Iliad video to me really sealed the deal as far as like this guy understands exactly what I would like to see in this.
That
story.
Iliad video was really good.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, this guy gets it. This guy.
Sorry about talking about you in the third person here, Lloyd, but that was a terribly good video. I think you got a lot of good feedback on it, didn't you? I
did, and I was surprised. I can never tell what's going to be popular and what isn't. I had no reason to believe that that one was going to be a hit. I was very surprised that the one I did recently on forests people really loved, and I thought that was really obscure. But by and large, if I do something about axes, people watch it far more than if I do something about something other than axes. But occasionally, I did one on dyeing shirts, and it was a very successful video. So I keep getting surprised and disappointed. I mean, I have to say, occasionally I do one, I think, wow, that was top, and it just sinks without a trace. There's no.
Yeah, you can never predict. You know. Okay, so what is it? Lloyd, why did you agree to this then? What is it you particularly like about this project? I mean, you know, is there anything? Because you said that Carthage wasn't necessarily. I'm sorry, I'm going to smoke while I'm doing this.
Right.
Sorry, I know I'm a terrible host. So you said that Carthage wasn't your particular area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Where was?
Well, I've got a degree in archaeology, and so I did do, for instance, an entire course that was just about the Persian invasions, so Thermopylae and Salamis and all that.
That's fantastic.
And so that was with John Lazenby, that you you might know that name. He's written a lot of the main books on a lot of this, including he wrote one of the main books on the Second Punic War as well. And I did a lot of Roman archaeology as well, and archaeology of the Roman Empire was another one of the topics, although that's almost all post-invasion of Britain. And
right, okay.
We're looking significantly further back in time than that.
Yes, just for anyone who's unaware, this is before the Romans invaded Britain by a few hundred years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they hadn't conquered France, Gaul, sorry, you know, they didn't have Greece, they didn't have anything outside of Italy, really, did they?
They had about half of Sicily, they had Sardinia and Corsica, and that's about it. They didn't even have all of Italy. People think of Gaul as equating with France, but actually Gaul was that region where Gauls, people who spoke Celtic, Gallic languages, lived, and that included the north of what is today Italy.
The Po Valley was all Gallic tribes, wasn't it?
Yes, and they had just been fighting the Romans. In fact, he was timing his invasion with that in mind, and so far as we can tell, when he descended from the Alps, he did so into an area of Cisalpine Gaul, the northern Italian bit of Gaul, where he had already forged alliances, so he arrived amongst friends. And that was probably necessary, because if he was, when he came off the Alps, he was in a sorry state. He had a bedraggled and exhausted army.
Yeah, should we start at the beginning rather than jumping in there? Because I noticed that we're getting into the what happened, and we may as well start at the beginning, right? I mean, do you want to? What can you tell us about Hannibal's family life? You know, what situation was he born into?
Well, his father was a very successful general. He was one of the Barker family, the Barkids, as they're sometimes called, which was a name which they hadn't actually had for very long. It was it seems to mean thunderer, or something
Yeah,
like
I thought
that.
it meant thunderbolt or something like that.
There are loads of translations, and they're all similar: thunderer, thunderbolt, lightning, etc.
Well, that's a cool name to have, isn't it? I mean, that's an awesome name.
Yeah, and it seems that they got it from their military successes.
Yeah,
and he
sorry.
yeah, that's right. He was instrumental in conquering an awful lot of what we today call Spain, and he was also a general in the First Punic War who fought a long campaign in Sicily, which wasn't actually tremendously successful. He ended up spending most of his time up in the mountains just keeping out of trouble, but he was
But they
never
weren't defeated, were they? Yeah, sorry.
That's the thing. He was never defeated. So when Carthage said to him, "Do you know what? Come back. It's all over," he was pretty pissed off. He's like, "Well, hang on. I've still got an army here, and I'm undefeated. How dare you, make it look as though I'm having to surrender?" And
Yeah, I didn't lose.
yeah, damn it. Technically, that's
It's
still
important.
a win.
Yeah, it's Germany in World War One, isn't it? Weren't
So
defeated on German
I can
soil.
imagine that this is the conversation that I may have the Lion's Brood, as they're sometimes known, his sons. They may have at some point in the comic have a conversation with one of them saying, but he was never defeated, blah blah blah. Our father, this, that, we've got this to live up to, and Hannibal might be slightly more level-headed than his younger brothers, and say, yeah, he was never defeated. But then again, he didn't actually take Sicily either, did he? Which is what he was there for. So.
That's a good point. So Hannibal is going to be. So the three brothers are Hannibal. Was it Mago and Hasdrubal?
Yes. There's also Hanno, who is in some documents described as another of the sons.
Okay.
But it seems that actually he's a nephew, but a nephew from a sister who was. He had two. Hannibal had two sisters who were quite a bit older than he was. So I think he was probably, even though he's a nephew, he's probably of similar age.
Right. Okay. So probably, yeah. So but still a close family relation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. So okay. Yeah. So what are these guys going to be like in? Well, I mean, I assume that I've automatically assumed before even asking that you're going to be portraying the events as realistically as possible. Is that correct?
Everything I put in it has to be something that is at least feasible and doesn't contradict the history. But
and we create a logical narrative from point A to point B.
Yes, but I am going to put in a plot that's not in the history books because it can't be. We're trying to create relationships between all sorts of characters, which you need to get drama, and history doesn't tell us anything about the relationships between these characters.
No. I mean, how would they know? But okay, yeah. So do you want to tell us about the characters, how you're going to write them then, and do tell people if you're just the nature of the main characters.
Chris, I'm sure is very curious to know as well.
Is this not something you've got any plans for yet? Because you've made Hannibal sound like a more level-headed chap, which I suppose he would have been.
Yeah, I think he probably almost certainly was because of what he was able to achieve. A pretty level-headed guy.
Realistic.
Yes, and there would have been at least some level of niceness to him. He was able to forge an awful lot of alliances, and the Romans at the time were marveling that there were no mutinies among his men. Could you imagine if you signed on as a mercenary to go marching to Spain with him, and he says, okay, well, actually we're going to go to northern Spain. Oh, actually we're going to go across the Pyrenees. Oh, by the way, we're going to go across southern France now. Oh, we're going to cross the Alps. All right, we're now going to take on Rome in the backyard, and I think we could do this in maybe a couple of years, and then it'll take you a year to march home again. But it's only 4 years. I know you only signed on for 6 months, but 4 years. Come on, it's an adventure.
Imagine the tremendous charisma he must have had to make that happen.
And can you imagine the conversation he had after 9, 10, 11, 12 years? So what are we nearly there yet? Like the kids in the backseat of the car. Are we nearly there yet? Shut up and eat your opal fruits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, he must have found a way to get his men invested in the war itself. With whatever rewards at the end that they were going to get.
Yeah, he must have made people feel valued, and he must have been able to instill hope and being part of a great big project. He was inspiring. He must have been inspiring to some degree. And so I can't make him a charmless, mirthless guy. There are even a couple of little anecdotes about his making quips. They're not tremendously funny, but they are supposedly...
They're dry, aren't they? Very. Yeah. I mean, I love when he goes over to Antiochus, and Antiochus is marching his army before him, and he says, "Do you think this is enough for the Romans?" And what does he says to that?
He says something along the lines of, "Yeah, I think that should be enough for them to defeat." Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
For them to chomp through quite happily.
It's all very quite down to earth stuff and quite dry. And I mean, there's something about Hannibal that's very charming in the fact that he must have had this great personality, and yet he comes across as being surprisingly humble. When you hear when you read quotes from him, he's not. He doesn't seem to be very self-aggrandizing.
No, he doesn't. But the trouble is that we have these grand speeches that supposedly he said, but that's according to Livy, who was writing ages later.
And wasn't anywhere near it.
And when he has, I mean, one of the scenes that's definitely going to go in is when Scipio, I say Scipio, and Hannibal meet on a hill in the middle of the battlefield of Zama, in between the two armies, in full sight of both of them. It's just such an iconic moment. It's got to go in.
It's amazing, isn't it? I cannot wait. I cannot wait.
I can't possibly reproduce what Livy says happened. According to Livy, one man reeled off this tremendous articulate speech, which goes on for 2 pages, and then in reply, the other guy reels off this tremendous long articulate. So that doesn't work in a graphic novel. Plus, I don't buy it anyway.
No, why not?
It just doesn't seem the way that humans in that situation would behave. I'd imagine you'd get up there and you'd probably start with a bit of small talk. All right, nice view from here.
At that point, you've got to start wondering about the historian, really, because I mean, by that point, it seems like he's telling a story rather than relating accurate history itself, doesn't it? Because I mean, they obviously probably did have a conversation, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he wouldn't have known what the content was. So, what, are you just going to basically paraphrase it into shorter amounts?
No, I think I'm probably going to have them say completely different things, actually.
Right, okay.
Interestingly, I was contacted by a professor from America, a university in America, who has a theory that the Battle of Zama didn't even happen.
Sorry, are we talking historical conspiracy theories now?
Sort of conspiracy, in that he was suggesting that it was a figment of later Roman historians they wanted to have the revenge for Cannae. They wanted the big showdown, and so they made one up.
So what does he think happened?
I think he imagines that the actual war was a bit of a damp squib, and that eventually Hannibal realized he was on hiding to nothing in Italy and thought, right, stuff it, I'm going home. I've run out of money, I've run out of will, I've run out of everything. So he goes back to Carthage, and that it all just sort of fizzles. And one of his pieces of evidence for this is that he reckons that the date for the famous military circular harbour in Carthage is actually wrong, and that it's actually post-Second Punic War. And if it were post-Second Punic War, then they couldn't have built it, because they would have been forbidden to build precisely that sort of thing at precisely that time. Most of his evidence is absence. So, for instance, he says, isn't it weird that there's no massive monument to Zama anywhere, and yet the Romans built massive monuments to all their other big victories, but there's nothing for Zama? And isn't it weird that in the Battle of the Great Plains there's no mention of loads and loads of elephants, and yet at Zama, suddenly, from the ether, they have loads of elephants? Well, where did they come from, and so forth? I may do a video about this. I think he's probably wrong, but it is a very interesting idea, and it's not totally unfeasible.
No, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, especially as it would be the sort of thing you could conceivably fabricate as well, because I mean, you could say, oh well, the tiny remnants of Hannibal's army that couldn't have defeated us because they were tiny, and then all of these fresh conscripts who are basically they don't know anything, it's a guaranteed win. It's a battle that even Hannibal couldn't win. So if you're going to make it up, it is at least plausible.
Yes, although the dramaturgist in me would really quite like a big showdown.
Yes, I don't think I would be able to go with that either. I would have to have.
And we've just got to have that meeting between Scipio and Hannibal.
Yes.
We've actually got to, eventually Elizabeth has got to meet Darcy. And
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's the thing. At the end of 18-year campaign where they've effectively ended up becoming each other's nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got to have a showdown. You can't not. It would be a tragedy.
Yeah, and Chris is looking forward to drawing that showdown because he wants to do deserts.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be a real bummer to miss out on that opportunity. Because, yeah, I mean, it's an epic final battle in the desert. And, yeah, you've got these battles that are in, like Trasimene, or however you pronounce it.
I would say Trasimene, but whatever, yeah.
Right, like you have these... Like even just color-wise, it's interesting because you've got sort of these green, lush battles in forests, and then you've got the desert battles, and then you've got the Alps. So there's such a range of. All you need now is just something that takes place in like the pits of hell, and then you can kind of balance it all out. But yeah, I hope Zama happens because it's a great.
I do intend Zama to happen. Besides, I know that you've almost certainly invested in lots of beige paint. So
Right, yeah.
I don't want that going to waste.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since we're on that subject, I mean, let's talk about the interesting art that we're going to be seeing. Because I mean, you've got the Alps, you've got the sort of dry lands of Spain, you've got the lush lands of Italy, then you've got the deserts of North Africa. I mean, it's a hell of a tableau to have in a graphic novel. It's going to look gorgeous, surely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it runs the full range of.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to choose somewhere to do, this is a great choice.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I was expecting Chris to agree with you there.
Yeah, of course. But yes, I mean, I really like the terrain for the three great battles, Trasimene, Trebia, and Cannae as well.
Mm-hmm.
That should be nice and interesting because one of the things that we know quite a lot about these battles, don't we?
Well, we've got good descriptions of them in history, but unfortunately, an awful lot of these historians are copying each other. And I read Livy with my skeptic's hat on all the time because a hell of a lot of the detail of this war is only in Livy or only in sources written by people who'd read Livy.
Ah, right, that's interesting. So which specific parts? Can you name any?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful battle which I definitely want to put in, where a load of slaves are all. It's a wonderful scene. The idiot commander of the Romans says to these slaves, "Oh, I want you to prove that you've killed a Roman. So in order to win your freedom, you have to bring me back a head."
Yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool.
And so, and I imagine. That all his his sub-commanders looked at this guy saying, "You just said what to them, you idiot!" So now they all get their freedom if they just got a head of some sort.
Yes, so any head will do.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, a lot of them look fairly Roman or Carthage. He looks like, okay, he's another slave, but oomph, there you go, there's a head, and then hang on, you've just beheaded the guy next to you. Yeah, well, he had a head and he looks Carthage. Yeah. And then of course the next 5 guys, they're all going to want the head. So now you've got 5 slaves wrestling for the head of someone who was another slave. And so it all goes a bit tits up. And I think that's just such a wonderful story. I want to be in it, even if it's not true.
Fair enough. So yeah, okay, so there's going to be a fair amount of artistic license, but generally because there has to be for the format, right?
Yes, but it's as I say, it's founded on stuff. I will be able to say, well, it's in Livy. Well, so-and-so's going to happen.
If the historical source says so, you can't turn around and say, well, I mean, people could, but what are you going to do? You can't ask for more than that, can you? And like you said, that is an entertaining story. So. And
there are things that I will have to make up because then, for instance, Hannibal had loads of spies, supposedly, who were feeding him all sorts of information about what the Romans were up to. And at several key moments in the plot, the Romans were amazed that he just seemed to know what they were going to do next. How did he know this? And so there were presumably spies, but we don't know any details at all about these spies because they were successful spies. So any detail I put in about how messages were being relayed to Hannibal will be the stuff of invention. But then again, I'm inventing something which almost certainly did exist in some form.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, I think people can accept. I mean, I'm more than happy with that, because I mean, you've got to anyway. How else would you portray it if you didn't?
Yeah, I think a big mistake in the storytelling would just be to have a series of this happened, and then this, and then this, and now we're going to go here, and then this, and then this, and we just follow Hannibal as he does this and that and this and that, and that is so boring. It's way more interesting to kind of, in a way, almost get away from those people, from those key people, and just sort of be among the commoners in a way, or just be kind of more in the world itself, and not just have this sort of textbook version.
Yeah,
this textbook chronology. Yeah, because it's also really hard to care about Hannibal. Like, why should you? Like, why should anybody really give a shit about this person? It's not really, and it's hard to. It's way easier, I think, to care about some guy who's just some no-name soldier whose horse dies. To me, that can be just as powerful as, you know, this big, larger-than-life guy that you're supposed to care about. I think that just those little stories like that, those little, whether they're tragedies or whatever, that I think is where kind of the meat and potatoes is of something like.
It probably is, but I'm not going to lie. I'm in it for the big battles.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
That's why I'm here. Okay, so what was the subplots going to be? That was the invention. What are you inventing, and why do you have to invent it?
Well, we had a Skype conversation, and we've been obviously corresponding by email as well ever since we got together. And one of the things was we wanted to avoid this just a list of events. This happened, and then there was this battle, and then there was this battle. And I have actually read books like that. Have you come across Chapman? Is it Chapman Pincher? The Jungle is Neutral. His an amazing account of this guy who fought the most amazingly interesting war in World War II. He was in the jungle behind Japanese lines for almost the entire war, sabotaging stuff and working with the communist Chinese and so forth. And it's one of the most boring books I've ever read. And you think, how did this guy manage to make this book boring? It has since been rewritten by someone, presumably just taking the same facts but trying to make them a bit more interesting. Anyway, it is just a list. I did this and I did this. It's almost, you know, like a catalogue from his diary.
Yeah, definitely.
And Chris did not come to me saying, "Will you please, Lloyd, will you please abridge Livy for me?" What he said was quite liberating. He said, "I want you to tell a story, tell your version of it." And so I intend to jump around in time, going back and forth. So it's not just that list. And the main glue is Scipio. Scipio becomes, who survives the war. He becomes actually, in some ways, quite similar to Hannibal, in that both he and Hannibal became outcasts who were deeply held suspect by a lot of their own, you know, the authority figures in their own societies.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. A lot of people sort of forget that kind of you would really call them failures in the end. You know, I mean, Scipio's political career failed. Hannibal failed at his endeavors, so it was all this giant kind of waste, really.
Yeah, they were rejects in the end.
Yeah. You know, I mean, Hannibal did run for Suffolk though afterwards, didn't he? In Carthage.
Oh, he actually was elected. Yes, yeah. And he governed very competently for some years as a. You said Suffolk?
Was it Suffolk or?
Safite? I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even try.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the same thing. No one knows how to say it. Okay. So yes, and was elected and governed for some while, and according to what history we have, immediately he realized that the Battle of Zama was a failure. He just calmly got on his horse and rode back to Carthage, thinking, well, I'm going to be more use in being a man on the scene to pick up the pieces of this wreck than I would be if I just threw myself onto my sword now. I see him as very level-headed indeed. And
yeah, I do as well.
And didn't he command a navy afterwards as well?
Yes, and not brilliantly successful. Although again, he wasn't defeated. He lost the battle, but he wasn't actually the overall commander. He was only in command of one wing, and his wing wasn't the one which lost the battle.
Can we talk about how retarded Antiochus must have been at that point to have literally had the best land general who possibly ever lived drop into his lap and not give him command of the land army.
Yeah, but he's king, you know.
So stand behind him and, you know, like say that you're, you know, point your finger at him so it looks like he's giving the orders or something. I wouldn't care. Take him as an advisor. My God, the man's like a military genius. It's like, yeah, you go command the boats. It's just, what are you talking about? I fought the Romans in hand-to-hand combat for 20 years. You know, why would you want me controlling your navy? It's ridiculous. It's just, oh, Antiochus, you moron. You know,
well,
come on,
then,
man.
You know, think what the football player Gaza was like when he became a manager of a Chinese football team.
I don't have a clue.
I saw the documentary, and essentially, he was an incredibly famous footballer, and he got hired to be the manager of a Chinese football team, and they followed him on this documentary, and he essentially was a broken down version of his former self. You know, the years had not been kind. Alcohol had done its job. So, yeah.
I don't think Hannibal was an incompetent commander towards the end of his life, though. Surely.
No,
I mean,
there is no evidence for that whatsoever. But it's possible that his enthusiasm for fighting another land war had waned a bit.
Well, possibly, but I mean, he did offer, though, didn't he? I thought he offered Antiochus to take command of them.
He may have done. I can't think of.
I've read like several
bit of evidence of that.
I've read several novels, some of which are dramatizations, some of which are like just more dry, of Hannibal's life. So I've picked that up from one of them, but I was under the impression he'd offered his services because he obviously was like, well, Antiochus shit.
Oh well, he offered his services to Antiochus or Antiochus or however you say it. So yes, but I can't say with any authority that he specifically asked to command the land army.
I guess if I was going to infer, I'd probably assume that he was like, well, I'm a commander of soldiers, not boats.
But I love the idea of him, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a really great visual of like an old, ragged, messed up, kind of mentally unstable Hannibal on boats, catapulting buckets of snakes at people, because that was apparently a thing with like
that's what it is.
That was like one of these tactics that I don't know if he came up with it, but I read somewhere there was some mention of that, which again is a great visual. Like, I mean, just opening, like if there was a Hannibal movie and it opened at sea with this one-eyed dude launching a bucket of snakes at people and not like the stormy waves. I mean, that's amazing. Like, that right there is just, it's so over the top, kind of ridiculous, kind of insane, but kind of awesome at the same time.
There's obviously a good explanation for all of this, isn't there? You know?
Right, it's like, how did this guy...
Yeah.
Right, it's like, what brought this guy to this point where he's
chucking buckets of snakes at people?
Fucking snakes at people, yeah.
But it's just one of those historical things that has always just annoyed me, where I just want to just slap Antiochus on the forehead. It's like, no, give him the army, go. But anyway, so let's talk about the journey through the Alps then, because that's the most famous part, really, isn't it?
It is, but perhaps shouldn't be, really.
I agree, totally.
But yes, that's the bit everyone knows, and my current plan is that yes, it will be in the book, but there was a point where my plan A was actually never to have the trip through the Alps, because that's the bit everyone knows about. We've got so many other things we could tell people about, and I just thought it could almost be like a running gag throughout the entire thing, that when everyone says, but tell me about crossing the Alps, and to which they say, oh, don't ask, and then and then on to the next thing, and we never actually get it. But yes, I think we probably will have something in the Alps.
I think you've got to, really. People expect it. You know, the elephants in the snow. Come on, everyone expects that.
Yeah.
And wasn't there a great bit in the crossing of the Alps where the way was blocked by boulders or something, and there's a thatch and heats it.
The wine. Like,
is that true?
Wine.
Is that a Livian invention?
No, that's I mean, it is in the history, but it's only in one or two. I think it's only in one or two sources, and nobody else, no one else mentions it. I don't see that as crucial, to be honest. He had tens of thousands of men with him, including engineers, and he gave orders to them to build a road. And if they came across a couple of boulders, the idea that Hannibal had to come up with this idea of his own and step forward and pour a bit of vinegar on and dissolve a rock. Oh, come on. You just say, right, engineers, there are 4,000 of you, you've got 2 days, or you're sacked. And
I agree with you. It obviously wasn't going to provide an impediment to like a 50,000 man strong army, but I just found it a really interesting story, and I was just wondering how true it is, because I mean, how the hell did he know to do that for a start? You know, it seems like a point of remarkable brilliance. If that was true.
No, I think that would have been a technique that would have been known to people. You
Really?
heat something up a lot, and then you cool it down really quickly, and bang.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is my modern living. I never have to do that sort of thing.
There are loads of, loads of other ways. You can. Another thing is you hammer in seasoned wood, and then you soak the wood, and the wood swells, and so if you've got even a tiny fissure, that'll break a big rock.
But it just strikes me as terribly impressive visuals that could be in it.
Yes, but I think, though, another impressive visual is the scale of what. And a similar point to the one I was making in my Sieges video. I don't know if you saw that. Where if you've got tens of thousands of people, massive engineering works that you think might be completely beyond the ancient world actually become quite simple. So if there's a boulder that's 20 foot high, and you need to get an army over it, you could just say, okay, we're going to build a ramp up to it and build a ramp down from it. Every man in the army has to bring one rock the size of his head per day. That's nothing. Yeah. If you've got 30,000 men, that's the ramp built.
Yeah.
And you're not asking much of guys.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point, actually. Okay, so the crossing the Alps is going to be a small part, but I understand why that would be. So I take it there's going to be a lot of focus on the alliances between Hannibal and the Celts as he arrives in, because if I recall correctly, he only arrived in with something like 25,000 men or something.
26 is the usual figure, yeah. Yeah,
so it's a tiny force, really, by the time he'd end up, because he started off with something 100,000 or something like that. And so, it's a tiny force he arrives in Italy with, so he's obviously going to have to recruit heavily from the local area. So I assume, can you tell me, what sort of thing is going to happen to allow that to happen?
I don't know how much of the plot Chris wants me to give away, but yes, he has to make alliances with Celts, and we have very good reason to believe that these happened. And one problem he had is that by the time he marched down to the south of Italy, he's then got an army that's largely consisting of Celts from the north of Italy, and quite a lot of them, after a couple of years, were quite keen to go home to see the wife and kids, and and maybe bank some of this booty they've been amassing.
Survive the war, yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a problem, and it takes him a long time to get a decent number of southern Italian states, many of which were Greek-speaking, of course.
Yes, of course.
To ally with him. So for a long time, he's reliant on this major Celt contingency in his army. Yes, so we don't know details. I'm going to invent a couple because I think we need some details just to get a hang of a few names of some faces. Yeah. But I don't plan to go into a huge amount of detail on negotiations, other than to make it clear that he was constantly having to negotiate everything, because but by the end, the core army that he'd set off with from Spain some 16 years earlier was tiny. Almost all of his army by that stage would have been people recruited during the campaign. Mm-hmm. So he would have been in a near constant state of negotiation with them.
Right, okay. And so he must have been a tremendous diplomat. And I mean, you would have to make him quite empathetic, really, to be able to understand other people's desires and needs and motivations, so he could directly appeal to them.
Yes, but then I don't want to go too far and having him grimacing and crying his way through the story.
No. I didn't say sympathy. Empathy just to understand. I didn't say he necessarily was
Hannibal.
sympathetic to their plights or anything. He might have been entirely Machiavellian for all I know, but he must have understood them, fairly well.
Yes, he must have known. I'm quite convinced that he knew soldiers inside out. He knew how to inspire soldiers, and he was a soldier's soldier. And the soldiers who looked at him thought, "I want to be led by a guy like that. Yeah. This guy clearly knows what he's doing, and he clearly understands me and what I want from a leader." And so, in terms of understanding men who fight, I think yes, he must have been absolutely consummately excellent at it. Which is not tremendously surprising, given that he was on campaign from the age of 9.
Yeah, he was raised in the military camps, basically, and his father was a great general who they all trusted. So he was bound to pick up something, wasn't he?
And he kind of lived with the troops as well. There wasn't that much of a separation between, he wasn't sort of off over here in his tower, there's. I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of stories of him sleeping out with the troops and this kind of thing. I don't know if that's true or not, but kind of becoming one of the guys,
I think that most of the great commanders sort of shared in their troops' suffering. I mean, he lost an eye going through a swamp, didn't he?
Yeah.
So I mean, once you see your general do that, you at least know that he's not going through anything you're not going through.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would build a tremendous amount of loyalty to him, as a person, rather than the institution of Carthaginian general.
And he did get wounded quite seriously at least twice on this campaign. So
he was definitely fighting.
He was putting himself within range of the... And he did also, and you could say this is perhaps more risky, he did almost all his own scouting.
That's insanely risky.
So when he was picking the field for a fight, he was doing it having seen it with his own eyes first. And there's a wonderful story in Polybius where he goes to a wig maker somewhere in Italy, and he gets a load, we don't know how many, but he gets a load of wigs made that are all different ages. And so presumably he must have had a very old man, a fairly old man. I don't know you could do a bald wig in those days, but the Romans definitely did make quite elaborate wigs, mainly were worn by women. But I'm sure there were some rich Romans who were men and vain enough to want to hide their bald patches. So yes, and by this means he disguised himself on scouting missions.
That is so risky. In hostile territory, you're enemy number one throughout the whole of the Roman Republic's history from this point onwards, and there you're just standing there in a wig looking at dispositions or something.
And how many attempts did the Romans make to assassinate him as an individual? You would think that they would be by bribing a near continuing relay of people to go out and just stab him in the back.
Yeah. You would think so, wouldn't you?
There's no evidence for it. Possibly the Romans would have thought that was an un-Roman way of carrying on. Definitely officially, that would have been a very not un-Roman way to carry on. They didn't want to by cheating. They wanted to beat him, the proper Roman way by...
Absolutely. I mean, we've got an example with Pyrrhus, haven't we? Where his surgeon offers to poison him, and the Romans send a letter to Pyrrhus saying, "Your surgeon's offered to poison you for us." So, I mean, at least there is a precedent for them being honourable in that way.
Well, one of Hannibal's family members was assassinated, though, right? Didn't they lob off his head and deliver it to him?
Sorry, who was that? Sorry.
No, hang on. I think you mean his brother Hasdrubal, who gets his head. He wasn't assassinated. He died in battle. And
his head fell off.
I'm fairly sure that it didn't come off accidentally.
Okay.
I found it. No. You mean his uncle, Hamilcar the Handsome, who ruled in Spain before him. Some histories say that he was assassinated.
Okay.
But one of the frustrating things with Livy is that he will sometimes say, there's this story about how he died, and then there's this story, and then there's this story, and then there's this story.
Pick one.
Yeah, and he doesn't say which one he believes. If there are several versions which completely can't all be true because they clash, he just presents all of them, and then he doesn't do what a modern historian would do, which was say, and I think it's this one because of this, that, and the other reason.
Oh, you've got to kind of admire that for a reason, I guess. You know, it's like, well, at least I can make my own decision.
Yes. Anyway, there are versions where he's not assassinated. He's just, for instance, I think the main story is that he was killed by a slave whose master he had killed, and the slave was avenging his master. And so you could call it an assassination, but it's not one that's being sponsored by a state or whatever. It's like a private vendetta.
Yeah. So is that the one you're going to go for? Is it?
If that makes,
if it's even in.
It might. I don't know that that's going to go in because that happened before. Essentially, if it's before Saguntum and after Zama, there's quite a high chance it's not going to go in. And that's still quite a broad range.
Yes, that is. Are you basically going to have a montage for the sort of the 18 years between, or the 16 years, or however many it was, or are you going to like map out, you know, his manoeuvres in Italy? I mean, that's a hell of a complicated thing to have.
I think it would it would just dissolve into a catalogue of this and then this and then this. If I'm leaping backwards and forwards and trying to get all the things that happened, I just think I'm just going to confuse the hell out of the reader. Really, you're just trying to pack too much in then. So yes, entire battles will have to be skipped.
That's a tragedy, but he did fight a lot of battles.
He did fight an awful lot of battles. Yes. In fact, I was just listing a load of them for the Hannibal World Tour T-shirt.
Yeah. Right.
And okay, can we cut this down?
Well, how many in total?
Well, we don't know, of course, because an awful lot of battles are just alluded to. When he's on the way to such and such a place, there are scouting minor battles. There are foraging. He's constantly sending out foragers, and his foragers are constantly doing battle with the enemy. So there are loads and loads of little battles that never made it to the history book. We know they happened. It's only really the big set piece battles that and even some of those. There are loads of sieges that went on for years and years, and various attempts to relieve the sieges and so forth. How many of those were big battles? They must have been, because if you want to, if someone's got 30,000 guys and you want to stand a decent chance of getting them to piss off, then you've got to turn up with quite a lot of guys. You've at least got to show a lot of, even if not many men get engaged, you've got to turn up with enough men to make them think that this is a substantial risk. So. Yeah, so we don't know, but loads.
So okay, no, well, I mean, I didn't know myself. I knew it was loads, but I had no idea how many. Okay, so he gets the Celts on his side, and then let's go to Trasimene. Is there anything before that we need to talk about, or can we just talk about Trasimene? Well,
Trebia is a hell of a battle. And I think in an early version of a discussion with Chris, we weren't going to put that in, but I want to put that in because I just think the moment when the Romans get across the river and they're finding it physically difficult to hold their swords because they're just so cold.
Well, I thought that came after Trasimene.
No, it's before.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. So yeah, so the Battle of the Trebia then. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that because that's an interesting thing. Hannibal displays a great deal of strategic competence, of course, but it's not like the whitewash you'd expect, is it?
No, it doesn't go in terms of the quality of his troops when they actually just come face to face, bashing it out in the open. They're not that much better. I mean, the Romans. Though an awful lot of these guys were fairly new recruited, they'd been trained, and they knew what they were doing, and they were well equipped, and they followed their orders well, and so forth. The Romans were very, very efficient fighting machines. So no, it wasn't a pushover, but he had every tactical advantage. He had a very well laid ambush, which they weren't expecting. He had very significant superiority in cavalry, which meant that he could run rings around them. The Roman cavalry, the main thing that the Roman cavalry are famous for is being defeated.
Yes.
Pretty much everyone does it every time. It's really rare for the Roman cavalry to do anything other, in fact, than just be defeated.
To be fair, well, not the other day, years ago now, I remember looking through Wikipedia's just list of Roman battles, and they mark whether victory or defeat. And you look at it and you think, the Romans really should be famous for being defeated. I mean, the Romans were defeated an awful lot throughout the course of their history, and it was just persistence, really, that got them through, wasn't it? You know, and I think the Punic War really displays this, you know.
Oh, it's a fabulous example of how the just sheer industrial might, political might, and sheer numbers of people can win a war. A lot of people say that the American Civil War was won by the North, even though supposedly the South had better quality of troops that were better led, but the industrial might of the North, the railways, the equipment that they could produce, the ironclads and so forth, it became overwhelming. And
the very same thing happens here.
It's like fighting a hydra. You know, he keeps chopping a head off, and another one just flipping grows back. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. And okay, so I think Trasimene really interesting how he got these tactical advantages. Because didn't the Romans go out without breakfast?
Yeah. They were like all cocky.
Yeah. He knew when he chose the moment to fight, and he said to his guys, "Okay, everyone, I want you to eat breakfast at stupid o'clock in the morning because there is going to be a fight very early tomorrow morning. The Romans don't know about it yet." So the Romans had to come across a river that was
cold.
It was flipping cold, and they hadn't had breakfast. And they had communication problems because they're so far from camp that it's difficult to hear the trumpets anymore. And he's got an ambush. And so he won the battle.
The ambush was his cavalry in a ditch or something, wasn't it?
It was Mago was commanding the cavalry, and they were in The trouble is that a lot of these battlefields aren't really certain. We can't say exactly where they happened, and a lot of them take place right next to rivers, and the rivers move. This is a big problem with Cannae, for instance. Every single book I must have seen 20 maps of Cannae, and every single map contradicts. Every historian's got his idea as to which side of the river they were, which way they faced, and the river is not where it was.
So basically, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We can make guesses, but that's all they are. And I'm actually probably going to duck that a bit. I think my version of Cannae is probably not going to involve the river that much because I know someone will say, "Wait a minute, I've got this book and the river's here." Yeah,
I assume we'll just go. You just go off the just the description written by the historical author, surely. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but even that doesn't really tell you which side of the river.
Well, no, it doesn't matter what side of the river they're on, does it? But Cannae. But okay, so Trebia, didn't a bunch of Romans manage to actually escape that one though?
Yes, and I think you've gone on to Trasimene, have you?
No, I was thinking of Trebia. I thought
Trebia. Yes. Oh, yeah. He didn't absolutely annihilate them to a man. And one of the pieces of evidence that the Romans were as good as they were is that even with Trasimene, a substantial proportion managed to cut its way out.
Yeah.
They got it together and they formed up shoulder to shoulder, and a well-drilled block of Romans is very difficult to stop, even if you've got it surrounded.
Yeah, which they almost did, because the cavalry apparently caught them in one of the rear flanks, didn't it? And so, I mean, that must have really shut them up.
Well, yeah. The thing with Trasimene is that his army the Roman army was very strung out, and the front of the army had actually formed for battle because it was expecting it and had seen the enemy, and most of the army got hit by the ambush, which was Gauls and cavalry rushing down from the hills, which were forested. So most of those were swept away and didn't get it together. But the guys at the front, who were actually formed up and ready for a fight, a high proportion of them...
Sorry, we're talking about the late Trasimene now. I thought we were talking about Trebia still.
No, sorry, I've gone forward again to Trasimene.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought Trebia, a bunch of them fought their way out, yeah?
Yes, I believe so. But I was saying that in the case of Trasimene, even when they were completely surrounded and up against a lake, some of them still managed to cut their way out.
Yeah, well, let's go on to that one, because this is one of the sort of greatest ambushes in history, isn't it?
I suppose, yes, one of the largest scale, and it was certainly utterly decisive. And
they didn't see it coming at all, did they?
If we go with history, no.
I'm assuming we're going on what we know.
Going with history, it seems that it was a complete and utter surprise. And there's a detail which I think will make it in, which is that there were people on the Roman side, including civilians, traveling with the army, who were carrying fetters. They were
really?
there to, because loads of prisoners were going to be taken, and they would have loads of slaves that they could then take back to Rome and sell. So there were civilians following the army with fetters, ready to chain people up. And
bit presumptuous.
How embarrassed were they afterwards?
Yeah, God, I carried this for nothing. But yeah, so this was. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read about this, but
right.
So my understanding is the Roman army, it's strung out along the sort of edge of the lake, walking around it, and they find a block of was it the Libyan infantry? Was it? That were formed.
It was Africans. Yeah.
Yes. Like blocking between the tree line and the lake itself. And so, as I understand it, they started to form up for battle, and then everything else just came down out of the forests on the hills.
Yeah, by the time the vanguard formed up, he deliberately pitched a camp on a rise that they could all see, that the Romans could see.
Right, like the night before, didn't he light some fires like way far away to kind of distract them, so they thought that they were further away than they actually were?
Yeah.
Right.
So the camp's there. So the camp's way over there on a hill, and it's fortified. That's where they are. The fires are lit. Okay, let's go towards that, and start forming up when we get close. And by the time they got there, they'd actually marched past most of his army. Whoops.
Yeah, I mean,
and it was foggy. It was also foggy and early in the morning as well. So you have this nice thick, dense fog, and
and then you've just got screaming Gauls coming out of it, and
right, with their little crazy trumpet things.
Yeah, exactly. And didn't like a bunch of Romans just drown themselves in the lake? And
yeah, they all started to run into the lake.
Yeah.
Well, not all, but a good chunk of them just started fleeing, and of course they're pushed into the lake. I mean, it's just it's a pretty good mayhem going on. Yeah. Yeah,
it was a hell of an ambush, and as I remember, really well executed. And it's just, I not that I was there, but from reading.
Yeah.
I don't have a time machine or anything, but I would go back and watch Hannibal's campaign if I did. But this is the thing. By this point, it really doesn't seem that the Romans know what they're dealing with, does it?
As far as we can tell, Hannibal taught the Romans an awful lot about how to fight a war. After Trasimene, the Romans developed their order of march. So rather than just sort of everyone walk over there, they would form up in a formed, orderly marching units that had a definite training to be stationed in certain places and keep lookouts in various directions and to signal and so forth. And they learned all that from Hannibal.
Yeah.
By the end of the war, the Roman army was a hell of a lot better at fighting, thanks to the school of Hannibal.
Yes, well, it's a hell of a school, isn't it? Because I mean, by the end of Trebia and Trasimene, like you said, a group of a body of troops did manage to escape that. But how many losses had the Romans taken between these two battles?
Oh, blimey! I'm sorry, I don't have the figures to memory, and I do know that several of the historians vary very widely in tens of thousands different.
I'll cheat. I'm just going to get Wikipedia.
Okay, it's a lot.
Yeah, This is the thing, isn't it? It's such an awful lot.
You're going to Wikipedia Trebia and Trasimene for losses.
So the Wikipedia estimate for Trebia is 26 to 28,000. So if we say 26,000 at the minimum, and then Trasimene, 30,000. Oh no, 15,000. Sorry, killed. So we're looking nearly 50,000 people.
That's 15,000 killed, and he took loads of prisoners as well.
Yeah.
So the losses were horrendous. At Cannae, which was the biggest of their defeats.
Well, yeah, let's go on to that.
There are estimates that it was something like 10% of the adult male population of Rome.
Yeah.
In terms of percentage of the population, it was far, far worse than the Somme.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
the Somme on Britain was a pinprick in comparison with Cannae to Rome.
Yeah, well, and that's what I wanted to kind of emphasize with talking about the number of losses. So if they've lost maybe just under 50,000 people, 40 to 50,000 people, somewhere like that. And how far apart were these battles? I'm sorry, I'm just going to check. Just to make sure.
Trebia and Trentani are both the same year.
Yeah.
So they're both they're in early 217 BC, I think.
Oh yeah, no. Trebia was December 2018 BC, but this
was it just okay? Just before.
Yeah, well, according to Wikipedia, you know.
What are they?
Yeah, exactly. So 6 months between them. So losing almost 50,000 men in 6 months to one guy that you weren't really expecting to give you this much trouble must have really shocked the Romans. And I guess this is why Varus was able to put the largest Roman army ever into the field, right?
Yes, it was. And so now you've gone on to Cannae. And yes, that was absolutely unprecedented. Now, the Romans had a way of doing war which was a bit odd, where they would elect consuls at the start of every single year. And the fact that there were these elections meant that there was a big hiccup in Roman command every single year. So that's an advantage that Hannibal had, because he has complete continuity of command. He knows all his men, he's working with them, they all know who all their officers are, whereas the Romans get not one consul, they get two consuls. And then the previous consuls become proconsuls, and it's all very complicated, and they're constantly arguing over who's in command.
Yeah, I thought they alternated day by day.
Is one version, but sometimes they split the army between them, and there are versions of Cannae which conflict, because if you take the standard history of Cannae, then if they were alternating and Varro was in command, then he should not have been on the battlefield where he was. The commander of the army wasn't standing there, which suggests that Paulus was actually in command that day. And it's possible that people were trying to blame Varro for Cannae.
Another conspiracy.
And then tried to make it look as though he was actually in command on the day. Or maybe they had actually split the army between them, which was, and perhaps I think probably a better explanation for a number of reasons. One, it would explain why they were both on the field commanding that day. Two, why they didn't put all the blame on Varro. In fact, they even went out from Rome to greet him on his way back and to thank him for his work. So if he was utterly in disgrace, why did the Senate do that?
Maybe it was also pragmatic. I mean, having that many men in the field.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. This was a much bigger army than they had ever had before. A consular army was usually 2 legions.
Yeah, so this was about 10,000 men, though, isn't it?
This was 16 legions. Yeah. It was so much bigger than anything they'd ever put in the field before. So they would have had no experience whatsoever in commanding that many men.
Yeah, so they would have needed the help. So, I mean, maybe this is why Varro is maligned now, but at the time you can look back and say, well, it was a hell of an undertaking against the guy that we clearly underestimated.
And just your trumpets only have so much range. And if there's a bit of wind, and the history says there was a bit of wind, so that's going to carry the trumpet noise away as well. There was dust, and so flag signals and so forth are going to be difficult. If your front line was somewhere between 2 and 3 miles across, and it's really difficult to get that in the head. And
let's
discussing with Chris about how we're going to draw that. Maybe you should ask him.
Okay, Chris. How exactly do you? That's actually a really great point that we do need to talk about, because people forget how. I mean, we're talking like football stadiums full of people moving across the landscape, and then I mean the lines weren't very deep, were they? And it was just incredibly long. And so, I mean, how exactly do you plan on representing that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I like the idea of you feeling like you're there somehow, even though that's kind of difficult to do in a comic, to kind of have that like docu style, whatever it is. But yeah, it's an insane amount of people, and I mean it's ridiculous to just be like, oh, I'll draw each guy. I mean that's silly. But the sheer scale of it is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my head I'm picturing with Cannae, because I mean, you've got at some point have a bird's eye view, right?
Well, actually, this is Lloyd and I have been going. See, did you hear that? Right. See, we've been going back and forth on little things like this.
There were no helicopters.
No, they weren't. But this is a comic or a graphic novel.
Oh.
You know, you can display.
Oh man, are you hearing this? Are you hearing this?
I'm hearing. Well, a huge
was
amount.
This an argument?
What was
just confirmed?
Yeah, it's a bit of back and forth. Yeah,
a huge amount of what I see as going through the minds of the commanders is looking at the formation of the troops. What can you see? You can see essentially the guys in the front rank reasonably well, but they're still a little bit distant, and there's a lot of dust around, and that's about it. And you're trying to work out what is his formation, what is his plan by what you can see, and that's completely destroyed if you've got a helicopter view. Well, they didn't have a helicopter view, so when the Romans are looking at the Carthaginian army, one of the questions, for instance, they're going to be asking is, where the hell are his Libyan veterans? There must be an ambush somewhere because we can't see them.
Oh, no, absolutely. I definitely think you should represent that, but I think it would be important to readers who aren't necessarily too familiar with it, but who might have looked at it and thought, oh, that looks cool, to at least demonstrate to them, because it's a complicated battle, and I think it's an important one. And I think when you understand the sort of the tactics of it, it gives you a better just depth of understanding of how brilliant.
And I think too, when you're up close and you're with these people, it's like, yes, you have kind of this like suffocated sort of perspective of their own limitations. But then, you know, when you pull back and you kind of go into God mode, I guess, and you kind of pull back, and you as the reader, you're kind of hit with this whole thing of like, oh shit, look at the scale of this thing. Like, these guys have no comprehension, and that's something that the reader can have. Like, the reader can have that feeling of like, whoa, but they don't. And then you actually kind of connect with them more and realize how just how dire the situation is, because you have the luxury of kind of going back and realizing what kind of situation they have.
Yeah, give perspective to the soldier, because I mean, yeah, you would start from the soldier's perspective where you can see hardly anything. Yeah. But then if you then count, give like just a zoom out sort of thing, and just to show the numerically inferior, I mean, it's almost like 2-to-1 inferiority of the Carthaginians bowing outwards as the Romans pack in, and then you can show the person reading it exactly how amazing this was, because I mean, when you look at it on the face of it, there is no reason that the Romans should march out to a plain, a giant miles-long plain that's just flat. There's very little to hide behind, and think, okay, well, we outnumber them nearly 2-to-1, and they're ragged and we're fresh. Why aren't we going to steamroll them just forward? It's completely believable for the Romans to think, oh, there's a bunch of Celts in the center, they're going to break. We're just going to stomp this, and then it turns out to be a giant trap. And you can't even see, there's no evidence for it to be a trap unless you're Hannibal and you can see the future.
But if you've seen a helicopter view before that, then that would spoil the moment. Plus, if you actually got high enough to see the whole battle, then the Carthaginian line would be just a faint sort of beige on beige fuzzy line.
Yeah, exactly. Though.
Exactly.
High enough to see that.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
The point. Yeah, that's exactly.
That's a good thing.
It's to give the reader a sense of perspective, just like, oh my god, and then you'd see this line like enveloping like half it, and then the cavalry come in the back, and you just think, wow, that's why they lost like 50,000 men in one battle.
I'm going to put a little timestamp on this part of the video.
We've had other discussions. For instance, I was saying that we could have a scene with a guy on a horse, and so the guy on a horse, he can see over quite a lot of men. So you'll see from a horse, you'll see a lot of men near you, formed up, and you can have it way off in the background something recognizable, a tree, a barn, or something, and you can just see lines of troops going way off to that point, and then we'll have him next to that tree. So he's ridden along the lines and he's giving the orders to the next units.
I definitely
next to that tree now, and then you see more guys that just go to the horizon.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that is something you should do. But I do think that at the sort of crucial moment of the battle, when it turns out the Romans who have got, I mean, you're obviously going to emphasize just how outnumbered the Carthaginians are, and when the Romans are just encircled on a flat, open plain, how they got themselves encircled, I really think it'd have a lot of impact to show that, you know, from just a top-down look at how he has screwed them, you know, and the Romans just like, you know, you can zoom back and they're just like, what the hell is going on? How are we surrounded by Carthaginians and getting massacred to a man stuck in the middle? You know, it must have been bewildering. You know, how could they possibly have lost?
Yes, although I imagine if I were a Roman in that killing sack, there are probably other emotions.
I just
higher
how
priority.
this happened.
But yeah, if I found a moment, I could be bewildered. Yeah.
But that's the thing, though. I mean, I suppose more the commander's probably thinking that. But yeah, but I mean, it's one of the most incredible military victories in history. So, I honestly, you've got to show it from the top at least once. Just one frame, just showing people just how screwed they are. Honestly, it's important, I think.
Like I said, I'm going to timestamp it, and
yeah.
There you go. So controversy there.
Right. Well, we'll see when we get there. But I mean, like with things like this, with all the locations, I really, I'm hoping that like once the campaign is done, once the Kickstarter campaign is done, I want to go on a road trip and hit kind of all of these places and just take a ton of pictures and really, see what it's like and Kenai and all that stuff. And really, I don't think there's anything even there. I think there's just a little monument that just says, "Hey, there was a battle here once upon a time."
Yeah, it's probably just a plain.
Yeah, it's just
honestly, that's the remarkable thing about it, is that there's nothing to suggest he should have won that. You know, that's why it's so amazing. But okay, so Wikipedia is giving me the figure of between 50 and 72,000, which I mean, I imagine it's going to be on the lower side of that, isn't it? Casualties, sorry. Yeah, who knows? But.
Yeah, and I'm probably not going to be talking. I don't think I'll be putting many actual numbers in the dialogue.
No, of course not.
Just to say this unit has been wiped out, and there'll be a picture of people dragging bodies from a field littered to the horizon with bodies, and so you just know it's a lot.
Yeah. But I was just talking really so people watching who maybe aren't so familiar, just so they can get, again, like we're talking stadiums of people get killed on this one day on this one field by a numerically inferior army that, I mean, it's the most unlikely victory on ever if you look at it on paper. And so what happens in Rome directly after this? Because this is one of the most controversial things about Hannibal. And this is the problem I have with Hannibal. It's this is the mistake that Hannibal makes. So would you like to talk us through it?
I think you're saying that he should have listened to what Mago supposedly said to him. And he should have
go
marched straight on Rome, and I'm absolutely with him all the way. No, he definitely should not have marched on Rome. That would have been the end of the war, and he would have lost.
Well, okay, let's talk about that.
He was not in any position to take on Rome.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't, but I mean, obviously, after having fighting Cannae, he had lost, 5,000-6,000 troops, and however many more thousand wounded. So undoubtedly, his army was obviously exhausted, wounded, but the Romans just put the largest army they ever assembled into the field, and it gets effectively wiped out.
Yep.
And then the enemy army turns up at their doorstep. That psychologically, how you can't pass that up. Even if it doesn't invest Rome itself,
In my vast experience of commanding armies in total war too, what you would do at this point is you would keep up that momentum and you would immediately go forward and take Rome. Immediately. It's like, okay, we're done here, let's go. Because they're in a weakened state, they're bewildered, they don't know what's going on, and that's when you just maintain. But
that's the thing, isn't it? Even if they don't know, I mean, they can't believe they've lost. This is something going to, Hannibal at the gates, terrible panic, everyone's freaking out, we're all going to die. Hannibal turns up and says, surrender. I think there's not a bad chance that the Romans would have actually surrendered. Whereas if you give them a bit of time to say, And if correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought he expected Roman envoys to come to him.
There's no evidence of that. He
No?
may have done, but
Right. Okay.
he had a small, tired army.
Mhm.
Rome was extremely well fortified and had very, 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 very large number of people living in it, including at least 2 legions. And this is the city that could raise 4 legions in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And there were also 2 other Roman field armies not very far away. And as soon as he set up camp outside Rome, they would have had him surrounded. The field armies would have come back to Rome, and that would have been it. Game over. He stood no chance of taking Rome.
I don't think he stood any chance of actually taking Rome either. But I think that he should have tried for the bluff.
Well,
I think he should have tried for the bluff.
He had an amazing opportunity to recruit. Don't forget that he'd beaten army after army after army. Everything they sent at him, he just swatted aside and slaughtered. And yet, even by the time he got to Cannae, still no one had joined him. Not a single Latinate or Greek-speaking. None of the southern states of Italy had sided with him at all. He had no allies. He had no port either, so he couldn't get any supplies in. And then suddenly he wins Cannae, and you think, right, now I'm suddenly in a tremendously good bargaining position. This is now the time to strike. I now want all those southern states to say, okay, we're on your side. And that is almost certainly what he was doing at that point.
I agree, but don't you think that would have been a bit more impressive if he went over there and then sent them letters say to the Samnites saying, I'm currently besieging Rome. Would you like to come and storm Rome with me? I've just wiped out 80,000 Romans. Wouldn't this be a fun thing for us to all do? I mean, you would have thought they'd have jumped at it. I mean, I can understand that if he's just going to ignore the capital, they'll think, well, he can't do it. But if he walks over there and he looks like he's going to do it, that could easily have rallied people, surely.
Yeah, but don't forget that those city-states like the Samnites, that was half the Roman army.
True,
half the Roman army was allies.
Yeah, that's true. But don't forget that during the is it the Social War with Marius and Sulla? Sulla had to turn back and destroy a 50,000-man Samnite army that appeared at the gates of Rome and killed all the noble youth of Rome because they hate the Romans. You know, these dudes have got a hatred of the Romans, and they are willing to act on it. So I really think that you could have expected something.
Well, maybe, but they had been completely loyal up until that point, and after that point, they were still mostly very loyal.
True, but again, I think
Hannibal was thinking, what do I have to do to convince these people?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, people forget that the Romans had just turned back a gigantic barbarian invasion. You know, so
you're talking about the Celts in the north.
Yes. Well, no, there was what was the name of the Celtic invasion?
I mean, immediately before this war, they had been fighting in the north, yes, and had just planted 2 colonies.
Yes, I can't remember the
Crona and the other one, which begins with M, I think. And yes, and that is one of the reasons that the Celts were so keen to get stuck in at Trasimene.
Yes.
That was them getting one back.
Yes. Yeah. So, but that I think that probably did help. You know, I imagine that was one of the reasons, the unity of it, wasn't it? But I mean, even if he didn't carry out the siege, you know, even if he was like, right, I'm just going to go over there, make a show, and then wander off to wherever I was going to go, you know, I do think he should have at least given, because you never know what happened at an opportunity. I think it was a missed one.
But he had a different opportunity, and he went for that one. And it was certainly a much safer opportunity. He was having to move constantly. He had to feed his army by foraging. And if he stayed still for any length of time, they would have him. And sitting outside Rome right then would have been he may as well just put his head on the block.
I suppose.
I think it's a case of...
It's a risk I would have taken.
I think it's a case of if he takes Rome, then what? You know? Like, really, I think it's one of these weird things where it's like, I mean, this is just my own take, but if he took Rome, then what does he do? He's not really a politician. Like, it's just that's the end. That's the end of his existence. Like,
Yeah,
there's
but
nothing for him to do after that point. Like, it's just, yeah, I took Rome. The end. His whole life has been about
Yeah, but that's only because he
this.
couldn't take Rome. I mean, if he'd taken Rome in the first few years of the war, he would have just gone on to do other things. You know, he would have just conquered other. Yeah, sure, he would have just found other people.
I think he would have killed himself, like he did. I think
Well,
he would have killed himself a few years earlier. You know.
No, he would have just gone off and conquered other people for Carthage. I'm sure.
I don't know. I think to me that's the weird thing is like you have this guy who does all this stuff, and then he just sort of stops, and it's not anticlimactic, but the fact that he doesn't launch an attack on Rome is super bizarre to me.
Yeah, me too. It just go over and threaten him with a few troops. For Christ's sake, do something. Anyway, so after Cannae, what happens?
Well, he then starts for the very first time getting allies in the south. But he's desperate for a port. And when I read the history, I get suspicious. The ports remain so loyal to the Romans for so long that I suspect that something was happening behind the scenes. I wonder if the Romans were paying these ports vast amounts of money to stay loyal, because it was one way to scupper Hannibal, because unless he can get a port, he can't get any resupply or money from Carthage, and he's just having to forage. And the more he forages in the south, the more he pisses off all the people he's trying to get allied to him.
Yeah, well, but wasn't that quite difficult though? Because Rome, of course, controlled the sea, so wasn't having a port. I mean, how useful was it? Could the Romans not just blockade it?
Well, even during the war, there were some victories scored against the Romans at sea. Yeah. It wasn't just a Roman lake.
Oh right, yeah, I suppose.
So yet he did get supplies and stuff, and of course he was able to sail back. But then, by the time he sailed back, that was much later, and yes, by that point he had got a port. But in the later stages of the war, a lot is to do with trying to keep ports. So they're besieging Tarentum, Brutium, all the sieges. A lot of the sieges which he bothered to persist with were ports. By and large, if he didn't take somewhere quickly by a siege, he gave up and moved on. The only ones where he went back and back and back and stretched out the siege for a long time were ports.
Okay, and so now we get into the sort of heavy-duty slog of Hannibal's time in Italy, don't we? Mm-hmm. Where he's not doing anything that would be particularly important, not important but interesting to go through, because he does a lot of sieges. He moves from here to there and here to there, and the Romans shadow him about Italy, but they don't challenge him again, do they? Really, or do they? I thought they kind of
they do, but they don't try to bring him to a major field battle for some years.
Yeah, because Fabius takes control in Rome, doesn't he?
Yes, and the Fabian Concator, he becomes known as. He was teased in the Senate as being Hannibal's pedagogue, because you just follow him everywhere. Yes, so he shadows Hannibal, and it certainly avoids disasters, which is good, and it does make things difficult for Hannibal. But after a while, the Romans start getting impatient. We should be taking this guy on. And some of the crackpot schemes that they gave the thumbs up to were, at one point, a veteran soldier who was apparently very big says, "Tell you what, give me a few legions, I'll sort him out." And incredibly, they go, "Okay." They gave him a load of guys who all then got slaughtered by Hannibal.
What a surprise! Yeah.
Yeah.
But at some point, Fabius does challenge Hannibal when he thinks he's got him, doesn't he?
Yes, and this is another of those ruse moments that we've got to put in, because it's just such an interesting ruse, where he escapes by driving a herd of cattle over a hill with torches tied to their horns, so that they look like an army on the march.
Yes, it's in the dark, isn't it? And,
it happens at night. Yeah.
Yeah, and they see all of these torches in the distance and think, oh, there go the Carthaginian army. move to intercept, and then the Carthaginians slip out, don't they?
Yeah, saying no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And he was, I mean, he was living on the march for so much of his life. There was almost nothing you could teach him about how to move an army from one place to another.
Yeah, and he was obviously such a fantastically smart guy anyway. To come up, I mean, he did, as far as I can remember, he doesn't use the same ruse twice. You know, he always just looks directly at the situation, thinks of a good idea, and then...
And that's one of the reasons that works, because he had a reputation for never going the same way twice, and the way he actually goes is back the way he came. So he's actually using the fact that he'd established a reputation for never doing the same thing twice to...
That's very clever.
Put back on himself. What a gift. But then, you know, how much of this is post hoc? How many of these ideas actually came from other guys that we don't hear about? And how much of this is the Romans afterwards saying, oh, he was completely brilliant? Yeah, it wasn't us being idiots at all. No, the guy we were up against was just genius. And
well, you know, we will never know, obviously, you know, we will never know that. So I can only assume that they're being at least slightly honest. Otherwise, oh God, there's a lot to question if they're not.
Is the Fabian Society in where is it? In Britain? Is that named after Fabius? Is that related to Fabius?
No, I don't think so.
I don't believe it is. No.
Yeah, I think it's some 18th century aristocrat or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I had never thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's soon. But how long was he marching around Italy not getting much done? It was a decade plus.
Yeah. I mean, the whole time he spends about 15 years on campaign in Italy.
Jesus.
And some sources say 16, some sources say 17, but it just depends how you count it when you decide. So, and whether he arrives late in one year and leaves early, and you know. So
yeah, but
I would say it's about 15 whole years.
Yeah, tremendously long time for a campaign. You know.
Yeah, and what do you say to a guy who hasn't seen his wife for 16 years?
I don't know. She's probably married to someone else by now. Maybe. What are you going to go home for?
No, one more year and we'll have this in the bag. Then you can go home. Just one more year. Trust me.
But the question then is, what the hell was Carthage doing? Because they were also fighting the Romans in Spain. But there wasn't a huge deal of like. I mean, how enthusiastic were they for Hannibal's invasion of Italy?
Well, according to our Roman historians, there were two main parties, those in favor of the Barcids and those against. And just to annoy everyone, the Carthaginians had even fewer names than the Romans. Yes. So his cousin, and one of his main commanders and his main enemy are all called Hanno. And there are... I did start writing this down after a while, but there are so many people. There are eight generals called Hasdrubal.
Dozens of Hannos.
Oh, Hannos, Gizgos, Bomilcars, Hamilcar, and Hasdrubal. Yeah, they seem to have about 7 names, the Carthaginians, between them. I lost you for a moment. You went all blank. Yeah. And the Romans aren't really much better. I started keeping a record. It took me too long to find it. Of the number of people called Publius Cornelius Scipio.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them as well, isn't it? It's because of the inherited name and the prestige of the name.
At one point, there were so many Scipios in Spain that the Romans at the time were referring to them as the Scipios.
So what was going on then? So you had the pro and anti, but who was the one with the influence? Which party was really, calling the shots?
We don't know, but we can guess that there was a war between the two main factions, and that it was in constant ebb and flow. There was an anti-Barcid family supposedly led by this guy called Hanno, who by the end of the war must have been a very old man, because he'd been a staunch opponent of Hannibal's father for a long time. Thank you. But the thing is that a lot of these aristocrats were making an awful lot of money out of Spain, where they had large estates and they had the silver mines and so forth. And so some of them perhaps were just fixated on, oh, I don't want to lose my silver mines. And it seems that they kept drip feeding reinforcements to Spain to make sure they didn't lose the silver mines. Whereas someone with their eye on the main picture might have said, you know what, if we just beat the Romans in Italy, we could then sign a peace, and one of the conditions is you take all your forces out of Spain.
Yeah,
you know, we can protect Spain from Italy if you only support us.
And it must have been phenomenally frustrating for Hannibal. What are they doing? Yeah. Well, they're sending more men to Spain. Oh, you know, for the love of God, just send me some more men. And okay, so let's get to Hasdrubal's reinforcements then.
Yes, well, this is all about Hasdrubal does eventually show up in North Italy with an army.
Mataras, isn't it?
Yes, and that is a great story which has got to go in, because that is when the Romans, for the first time militarily, really get it together. And they then start using ruses, and they start using the machinery of the state and their control of the countryside and so forth, and they're able to rush to that battle a very large number of troops that Hasdrubal was not expecting to be there. And so for the first time, the boot's really on the other foot.
There wasn't too much difference in the size of the armies, though, was there? I'll just get up. I'll make sure.
No, it wasn't. No, I'm afraid I don't have the figures. It wasn't ridiculous, but the point is that the Romans were much bigger than Hasdrubal was expecting.
Oh no, they were actually. Yes. No, sorry, I'm wrong. 30,000 to 47,000 Carthage to Rome, apparently, according to Wikipedia. So yeah, I mean that would be a surprise, especially if you weren't expecting an army to turn up. That would be a rather surprising thing, wouldn't it?
And there's a nice story, which will be something which Chris will doubtless have fun drawing. So I'm a bit conscious that you haven't said much for a while, Chris. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. I'm chill. I'm just listening.
Okay. But Hasdrubal rode out in front of his army to have a look at the Romans, because he was suspicious. He was thinking, hang on, how come there are so many of them? Where have these guys come from? And he, again, putting himself within easy sight of the enemy and at risk, rode out in front of his army and rode up and down the Roman lines and had a look at them, and came back and said that there was something very odd. A lot of these guys out there don't look shiny. Most of them have polished their armor, and they've got all their finery. They've cleaned the front of the shields. They're looking military order. They've all their sergeants have got them into soldierly fashion. But those guys on the end look bedraggled and wet and hungry, and there's rust on their shields. They have to come out to clean their shields. I reckon they forced march it here. I reckon we're actually up against a much bigger force than we realised.
Right. Okay.
He was right. I just think it's a nice, even if it's not true, it's a nice story.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to have the character doing as well.
Yeah.
To give him just to show that he does do things. Because otherwise, I mean, when you're reading it, it can sound like the generals don't really do a lot. They just stand there pointing at a map, telling people to do things. So you definitely want them doing things. But yeah, this is where Hasdrubal ends up dying in battle, isn't it? And they then take his head and throw it over Hannibal's ramparts on a camp.
Yes. Now, the Roman historians keep talking about how cruel Hannibal was. It's sort of standard wisdom that you had to say this. It was Hannibal was the thing that you frightened your small children with. In southern Italy today, they still say Hannibal at the gates when things are going wrong, and they still use him as the boogeyman. It's odd though, because the same historians saying that he was cruel, for every cruel act they write down Hannibal as doing, they write down 4 or 5 much worse things that the Romans do.
Yes, well, this is one of the things that drives me crazy about the Romans. The Romans have got such a good image. They've just got such amazing PR in the modern world. Everyone's like, oh, the Romans. It's like, the Romans killed so many cities, I don't mean armies, I mean cities. I mean, even in Italy that were owned by Rome in civil wars, they would take a city and kill people and sack the whole thing. And it's just, they would spend 4 days sacking one of an Italian city, and it's like, and then they're like, oh, Hannibal was a terrible person. Shut up! You are in no position to make moral judgments about who's a terrible person in Rome.
Well, they're doing human sacrifice.
Well, this is the thing. The Carthaginians as well. I mean, the Romans, which are the records, as far as I'm aware, that we've got, do say they do terrible, terrible things, and I mean, they sound very cruel, you know. But then, that's coming from the Romans. Well, that's the entire point. That's coming from the Romans, people who are, are entirely cruel on their own and aren't exactly the most trustworthy people on this subject. I mean,
the only human sacrifice that is mentioned in the histories during this war is done by the Romans, not the Carthaginians.
Yeah, they bury 2 people, don't they, under
in the forum. Yeah.
In the forum, sorry.
And every time a battle is won, we are told by Roman historians, including Polybius, who was actually living at a time which is close enough to the events that he was able to talk to people who were there. Hannibal does not kill his prisoners. Hannibal lets all potential allied prisoners go, and even Romans he sometimes lets go and sometimes he ransoms them.
Whereas
plus,
you would think he would just murder them all if he was evil.
Yeah, and more than that, those who died, he buries. He buries the men, and he gives funeral rites to the enemy commanders.
See, now this really plays into the Hannibal probably was actually a really honourable guy. I mean, like we were saying, you can't keep such a diverse army together in what is obviously looking like a failed campaign halfway through without being the sort of man that people have a tremendous amount of respect for. And these actions would indicate that Hannibal was actually a very honourable guy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I actually find this to be surprising for a Carthaginian, because when you read things that the Carthaginians... oh, no, I'm not kidding. The Carthaginians were not nice fellows. They were not nice fellows at all. They had no qualms doing terrible things to prisoners as a demonstration. Like the actual siege of Carthage in the Third War, where they end up just flaying Roman prisoners on the walls to basically taunt the Romans or something, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, they're not shy about inflicting pain on people who are their enemies, in any way. So,
but that might not have been wise. I know a lot of actually, because if you've got this massive multinational army and you want to attract allies, you've got to make everyone feel valued, and you've got to make everyone feel as though their nationality is not going to be used as the cannon fodder.
Yes.
At Cannae, he lost far more Celts than he lost of any other branch of his army.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing, actually. We should have gone through it. So, since you brought it up, do you want to talk us through exactly like the stages of Cannae? Because it's one of those things that it's so incredible. I mean, wasn't he like standing in the middle of the Celts when the Romans were approaching?
Yes, as far as we can tell. I mean, he's not ever actually described as riding on a horse around the field. It seems that he's on foot.
Actually, that's amazing, isn't it?
Down with the guy. But I don't. I mean, that doesn't. They don't say he was never on a horse either.
No, but they would just. I mean, like with Alexander and Pyrrhus and stuff, they would just incidentally describe him mounting his horse and then charging or something.
Oh yes, and we know the name of the horse and so forth. And yes,
exactly.
But he wasn't. He left cavalry command to others.
Yeah.
So he may well have been on foot for an awful lot of the battle. I suspect he almost certainly had a horse handy.
Yeah,
we are told he rode away from Zama.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm not suggesting he didn't own a horse or anything, but like in the battle when he was commanding, he didn't do the Greek thing, did he? The Greeks were always with the cavalry, but he as far as I'm aware, he always seems to have been like an infantryman soldier, general. He like actually in there. And as I understand it, the Romans pushed forward, and the bow, the Celts were arranged in a bow, and they kind of pushed back in, and that's how they kind of got sucked in, isn't it?
Yes,
the Romans thinking they're winning a
and there are loads of ways of analysing that. Sometimes it's described as a crescent. So rather than form up in a line, there's a formation more like that, pointing towards the enemy. Could it have been accidental? Because both ends were anchored by his veteran troops, and you've got a straight line of Celts in the middle who are all spoiling for a fight, and they won't obviously break away from the troops next to them, but the guys in the middle might all be playing the come on, we want to get their first game, or it could be that there was a slight rise in the ground, and that they couldn't actually see that they were out of position. I mean, there are so many ways you could accidentally.
I don't think that's accidental. I don't think. I would be surprised if Hannibal willingly fought a battle that he thought there was going to be any kind of accidental deployment in. And I mean, it was he must have had.
Maybe he was with them in the middle, screaming at them to get back into line, the idiots. And then when he saw all the Romans coming forwards, he thought, "Wow, I can't believe my luck. No, fair. I changed my mind, guys. Do you know what? Just stay where you are. This is going to go brilliantly."
Maybe, but I don't think that's how it would have gone down.
Well,
I think he would have known.
One of the biggest bits of evidence, it's only a tiny mention, it's like a couple of words in one sentence of Polybius, but he says that the Celts were actually not in a great big band in the middle, that actually it was a unit of Celts, then a unit of Spanish, then a unit of Celts alternating down the line. And that sounds like a very deliberate thing.
Yes, that would undoubtedly be
very definitely against the it just, he got lucky.
Yeah, no, I don't think he got lucky at all. Just that it's impossible that anyone would be that lucky that he just happened. I mean, he would just be like, well, I mean, they are massive, the Roman army. Might get lucky. He would never have fought that battle if he thought he was going to get lucky. No way. But,
well, you always need some luck.
Well, yeah, I'm not suggesting that he didn't have any luck. I'm just saying he knew how he was going to win it before he fought it, I think.
Right. But, so for the benefit of those who are unfamiliar with Cannae, the Romans formed up very deep in a massive hammerhead, essentially a dirty, great big block of Romans, and they were given the order, advance and engage the enemy. And if you've got 16 legions who all know how to fight, they're all trained guys who are all well equipped, but you're not entirely sure how you won't be able to control them piecemeal because the army's too big. What you could do is just form them up into one dirty great big block and just say, tell you what, go forwards and smash everything in front of you. What can go wrong?
Which is a good plan, really, when you've got that position. It sounds okay on the face of it, doesn't it?
Yep. And it's possible even, I may have a scene of a day or two before when they realize quite how many Romans they're up against, that Hannibal is saying that's great. Because the more beyond a point, they're not going to help each other. They're going to have so many guys that they're forced to just form up in a block and just go advance and engage the enemy because they don't have the command structure to do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I mean, when they do end up finding themselves flanked by the Libyans who haven't taken a step, and then the cavalry has defeated the Roman cavalry and comes back. I mean, what was the description of the Roman troops like at that point? It was quite grim, wasn't it?
It's staggeringly grim. And if we put in to the comic what Livy actually describes, then it will not be a comic that you could give to children. Seriously, there's a guy who killed a Numidian with his teeth because his arms and legs had been hacked off. And this was a guy. He was killed. He was lying on top of him.
Black Knight.
Essentially, there was a huge, great. Yeah, it makes you think of that. Except that it's grimmer than that because they were in a huge pile of bodies. And this guy was just on top of this guy, and so he just
Jesus Christ, yeah.
There were guys who committed suicide by burying their own heads in the earth because again they were just they couldn't move. There was just a pile of bodies and they were hopelessly wounded and crushed. And they couldn't stand the pain, so the only way they had of killing themselves was to suffocate themselves in the ground.
Yeah, because I mean, people forget that this went on for hours, didn't it?
Well, it must have done. I mean, just the sheer number of people.
Yeah.
And so one graphic way that we can give some sort of numbers to the number of dead is that it is said that Mago went to the Senate in Carthage with a bag, and he opened the bag and scattered onto the floor of the Senate all the gold rings taken from the knights and essentially all the noblemen of Rome who had died at Cannae, including 80 senators. By the end of there was 1 year. I'm sorry, I can't remember the year, but there's one year where they had to elect 133 new senators because Hannibal had killed them.
Jesus Christ! I mean, that's a scary amount of brain drain as well, isn't it? I mean, these are the leading men of Rome, and they're all getting killed. I mean, you're going to be looking to people who aren't necessarily particularly experienced statesmen for ideas. Just like, okay, does anyone want this? I mean, that's probably the reason that Scipio Africanus got the command, right, of Spain.
Well, yeah, you look good in purple. Yeah.
No one else wants to do this.
Well, Scipio, yeah, quite a man of destiny.
Yes.
The very first time we ever meet him in history is when he's saving his father's life in the middle of a battle. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's very cool, and again, it's about obviously a battle against Hannibal. Isn't he? He's on the losing side of several battles against Hannibal, actually, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's very usefully, even though he wasn't in command, very usefully for our comics purposes. He was at Cannae.
Yeah, he's one of the survivors. Yeah, I mean, imagine what he learned from that. You know, just Jesus Christ. Okay, we've got to take Hannibal seriously. but yeah, so just to go back to the Cannae, because they had effectively encircled almost all of the Roman army, and if I recall correctly, a description of them were just cramped shoulder to shoulder, unable to lift their weapons. So they would get like hacked down, and then as they were trying to raise their weapons, they get hacked down.
I have actually myself experienced that in a reenactment battle. It was a big enough battle. There were only about 500 of us, I think, on my side, but
still quite a lot.
And we were only formed up. Oh, I can't remember. Only like 3 or 4 ranks deep tops. But yeah, I was in the middle at the front, and all the guys to my right decided they'd much prefer to be to their left, and all the guys to my left decided they'd much rather to be. And when the army came to me, I was like this. Couldn't fight, and they rolled over us in a matter of seconds. We didn't stand a hope. Yeah, yes. The only thing we could have done was charge. But if I had done that, I know that I would have been on my own. So all that would have happened is I would have died a few seconds earlier.
Very noble. Basically all of these Romans just getting hacked down, and the battle took hours, and because there were just so damn many of them. I mean, it must have been quite traumatizing for the Carthaginian soldiers themselves, right? I mean, you're just killing what are almost helpless men in a lot of cases.
We are not told this. History does not record this, but that's possible. It's really difficult to say. Even today, there are people who are very happy to shoot lots of people in battle.
No, of course. I'm not saying all of them. Who would have been.
No. What is it like? But yes, it must have been pretty horrendous. And the. What do 30,000 men screaming sound like?
Yes.
Pretty horrendous.
Yes, absolutely. And the amount of just half dead ones on the floor and whatnot that you've already walked over to kill their comrades deeper in the mass of men. It must have just been just the most horrific thing to experience. But yeah, okay. So let's so we carry forward. The Metaros, the Carthaginian relief forces destroyed. Now, wasn't it Edward Creasy who said that this was one of the most important battles in history?
I couldn't say if it was him or not, but yes, it is sometimes said that this was one of the most important battles in history, because if those two armies had linked up, then ...
enough to storm Rome.
Yeah, I mean, if Rome loses the Second Punic War, which definitely was a possibility, if the Carthaginians had played their cards differently, and if both sides had played their cards a little bit differently, okay, see you in Chris. They could have won. And then, when you pass an exam in a university today, there would perhaps not be Latin on your certificate, but there might be Punic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Carthaginians had quite an imperial mindset. I mean, they were quite happy to conquer. So
they would have taken over Western North Africa. They would have taken Spain. They would probably have taken Gaul at some point. They would have had Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica. So they would have had most of the core of what became the Roman Empire. And
absolutely.
Obviously, it's pure speculation, but they would then probably have become a major naval power, which would then have meant that they could possibly have taken Ionia, Byzantium, So they could have been what the Romans became.
Yeah, yeah. The potential was there, certainly, I think. Okay, so the Battle of Metaurus it's one of history's defining battles, although it's quite obscure, really, isn't it? And so after that, what does Hannibal do? Because he must realise at that point, after having lost 30,000 reinforcements that he desperately needed, that this war wasn't going to end well.
Well, we have a dramatic moment. It's a shame that we've lost Chris for this dramatic moment, but this is another dramatic moment which I think he'll probably enjoy.
I'll send him the timestamp.
Yeah, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the honourable nature of Hannibal and how he gave people his respect and burial. And the next thing is his brother's head is chucked into his camp. That's a hell of a moment. You think that your brother's coming to your rescue, everything's going fine. The Romans, for the first time ever, pull off a military coup, and you, who's been so honourable up to this point, find that your brother's head has just been delivered to you, severed from its body. That's another major moment that's got to go in.
Yes.
So you're enjoying that one, Chris. Welcome back, by the way.
Yeah.
Hasdrubal's flying head.
Okay.
And is there any evidence to suggest that Hannibal and his brothers didn't have good relationships? Because when I was reading it, they all seemed very well disposed to each other. There didn't seem to be any infighting or backbiting or anything like that.
No, they seemed to accept that Hannibal was the guy in charge. He was the top guy, and they were all happy to work for him. But then he did give them very major jobs to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Here, hold Spain for me.
Yeah. So they could obviously.
Why do I get all the shit jobs? No, not really.
No, yeah, that's one of the things I found interesting about it, because that's very rare. Most of the time when you hear about siblings inheriting a kingdom or something, there's tremendous amounts of fighting, and Hannibal effectively had absolute power in his army. So it's not too different, and they seem completely devoted to him as a leader. So again, that speaks volumes of Hannibal himself. That everyone just agreed, well, he is the best. So I think it's interesting. But obviously this would have therefore been a deeply, not just on a tactical level, distressing, but an emotional impact. But after that, did there seem to be a decrease in his performance in the campaign?
Well, he's forced more and more into the defensive, and deeper into southern Italy, until right near the end he's really just holding out in Bruttium, one small region of southern Italy. So yes, it was the last big roll of the dice for taking Rome on in the field, and after that he could only hope for a strategic victory, or perhaps a treaty or something. But he just wasn't getting the support from Carthage, and then he's ordered back.
Yes.
Now, whether he had to obey out of duty, I don't think he did actually. I don't think they were in a position to order him as someone that they employed or outranked. But they did. The motherland did request him back, and he was expected to go back, it seems.
Well, I mean, he spent his whole life fighting for Carthage, really. So you would think that if they were like, well, Scipio's turned up with a huge army, we need you, why would he want to not go? I mean, he surely wouldn't want to see Carthage taken, would he?
Well, I think he'd probably think, if I leave Italy, I'm never coming back. I can't get here again.
Well, without a doubt.
It's not a miracle I can pull off twice. And I think he probably saw the writing on the wall when he was leaving. He was leaving loads of people behind, and I think he probably thought, right, everyone I leave behind is probably going to be killed. All the people who allied with me in all these southern cities, they're probably going to be on a crucifix within a couple of weeks. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
And
you can blame the Carthaginian Senate for this, guys.
Yeah, and when he loses at Zama, some of his army, his defeated army, was made up of Roman deserters. And
that's interesting.
Rome wasn't very generous with desertion.
No, no.
So I think, judging by the evidence, they were probably all killed and probably all executed quite horribly.
Yes, I can imagine that the Romans would finally have wanted to put an end to the terrible army of Hannibal. So, okay, let's go to Zama then. Let's get to Hannibal sails back with what was it, about 10,000 men, something like that.
Yes, it's really just a
Fraction.
core of an army, and half the men he went with had to be forced onto the ships. A lot of them were southern Italian allies who had not been allied to him for very long, who didn't particularly relish the idea of going all the way to Africa to be beaten up by a massive Roman army.
Okay.
And so he had to use a load of his troops to get much of his own army onto the ships.
That's interesting. So his leadership was good, but not that good. He
managed to pull that off.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't want to underrate him at all. So Scipio moves over to Africa and he defeats a fairly green Carthaginian army really handily, doesn't he?
Scipio has won the Battle of Ilipa at this point.
That's it.
And that's his big, gosh, wasn't I clever battle. But that was in Spain. He wasn't up against Hannibal at that point.
No.
And I think Ilipa, unfortunately, is one of the amazing battles that was not going to make it into the comic.
Really?
Well, sorry.
Well, it's a big one.
It's a very big battle, but it's very complicated, and it happens an awful long way away from Hannibal, who was not there.
Yeah, and weren't the Carthaginians saved by the rain in that battle? Am I thinking of a different one?
Hang on, they are.
There
saved
are lots of
by
battles. So.
They are saved by the rain in one battle. Is it Ilipa?
I thought it was Ilipa, because he was essentially doing a cannae on them, and the rain put an end to the fighting, and the Carthaginians retreated, saving some of their army.
The trouble with this is there are actually several battles which have rainstorms in.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
To be honest,
I'd
they
have to look it
sort
up.
of merge in my mind a bit. So,
Yeah,
but anyway, he's pulled off Ilipa, and assuming that he was, the to be credited with the genius of that, he's shown that he's pretty competent. And if we go by Livy's description of the battle, then it seems that he's learned an awful lot about how to deal with elephants and how to deal with armies in two lines and so forth. Plus, for the first time ever, the Romans have got superiority in cavalry.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about this then, because Hannibal gets back, and as I understand it, the Carthaginian Senate orders him to fight Zama with a green army they've recruited with untrained elephants and all the just new mercenaries. And Hannibal doesn't want to fight it, does he?
Well, in his talk on the hill, which we mentioned right at the start of this with Scipio, he does offer terms, but the terms are rubbish. The terms, again, history is clearly hiding something here, but if we just go with what we know, they'd already been given terms, they then had broken the truce, and then he's effectively suggesting worse terms after having broken the truce. So the suggestion being that he knows that Scipio is not going to take.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what he says.
Not going to take the deal. This deal's rubbish. No, we're going to fight, and we're probably going to win. That said, though, there is a moment when he almost wins that battle.
Really? I didn't think there was.
If he essentially has to win in the center before the Roman cavalry comes back, and he nearly does. He nearly pulls it off.
Unfortunately, I see. It seems that he didn't. I was going to say he didn't use them properly, but he didn't really have much of an opportunity with elephants in it because they were untested. So what else could he have done other than just send them forward in the middle?
The elephants were a bit of a liability. They trample their own troops as well as the enemy troops. They're difficult to command, and the Romans had by this point learned how to deal with them.
Yeah, they filed and just allowed channels between the ranks, didn't they? And they went through.
They knew how to let them through and to use light troops against them, and they also just lost their terror of them. And I'm wondering about whether there's have some officers looking at the elephants going in. Right, so we'll see if the Romans are still terrified of elephants, and then cut to loads of elephants running away. Okay, well that answers that one.
Yeah, and so didn't Hannibal put his veteran troops at the back so the green ones couldn't run away?
That may be one reason that they were there. He knew that he didn't have the manpower to just charge straight in with everything right off the bat. So he had to exhaust if he could exhaust the Roman front line and then charge in with fresh veteran troops, there was a possibility of carrying the day, and he nearly did it.
I didn't think it was that close. The authors I've read about it, describing it, they never made it sound that close. But they always made it sound like kind of a foregone conclusion. But that's interesting.
Well, there are different ways of doing it. And as a dramatist, maybe the way to do it is, I haven't decided yet, maybe the way to do it is with loads and loads of portents of doom. And have that conversation as if between two men who both know what's going to happen.
I would do it that way, definitely.
The doom way. But then there's also this could go either way. Come on, Hannibal, come on! Maybe Rocky will get that one lucky punch.
Yeah. I mean, but I do think you should present it like, I mean, Scipio, the way Levy describes it, Scipio seems to know he's going to win. I mean, he sounds confident.
Well, Chris, we haven't heard from you for ages. What about Scipio, man of destiny?
Okay. Well, as far as the Zama thing goes, what I would do is, I mean, Hannibal has had this incredible role, but I would set it up where it's clear that he's going to fail, and in advance that here he's going to fail, because it just makes that. It makes the fall so much greater if you can see the height from where he's falling. So that's I mean, yes, you want to cheer for him, but it's way more bittersweet if you just know that the end is coming and you know that he's going to lose. Not just because you know the history, but because you just realize that it's like, oh, this guy's he's fucked. This is the end. And I would set it up like that. I would let the reader know that this is the beginning of the end, the real beginning of the end, and
that's a good call.
And
drive the nail in,
By this stage in the graphic novel, there will have been loads and loads of scenes with Scipio as an older man, investigating stuff. So we the readers will know that the Romans won. Plus, I think even if you're not a major history buff, you probably know that it was the Roman Empire that. So I mean, most people haven't even heard of the Carthaginian Empire.
Well, that's true. But in the heat of the story, as it comes up, you can, like you say, you can see the Carthaginians on one side, the Romans on the other, and Scipio's acting like he's going to win. I mean, it's going to happen, but surely by this time you're quite invested in Hannibal as well.
Well, exactly, and you want that, you want to cheer for him.
Exactly.
You want to root for this guy, but you still know it's like, oh, he's going to lose.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Now watch.
Absolutely.
Now let's watch the downfall and let's watch it unravel.
Yeah.
And let's watch it, and then eventually it's like, oh, spoilers, and now let's watch him literally kill himself.
Yeah. I mean,
so it's part of that, just the extreme rise and then the extreme descent.
Yeah, it's more the sort of what it does to Hannibal himself, I think, is the important thing. Because, I mean, had he been defeated up until that point?
Well, not really.
He'd
not to that.
It had one reverse.
I mean, he'd been foiled plenty of times. There were loads of times he would turn up at a city trying to take it and not take it, or some people would chase him off from a city, but they didn't destroy him. That's the thing. Whenever he defeated the Romans, he destroyed them. Whenever the Romans beat him, he got a bit of a bloody nose and then marched away in good order to come back another day. They never caught him and destroyed him. So he'd never been defeated in that way. No.
No. And so, I mean, this has got to come across as like a big deal, surely. And I think that if the tragic end and the sort of character development that's going to come from that is important.
And it being a desert too. I mean, the desert itself is almost like a character, because it's just this. It's this symbol of just the emptiness that he's left with. After all of this, he's left with nothing. So there he is in this, baking in the sun in this desert with nothing. And to me, it's such a great final. It's like everything around him is barren. You know, even the landscape is barren. Like it's a perfect. Like compared to the lush, like say going back to the greenery and all this kind of stuff, you have this lush greenery when he's in this peak, and then by the end you're in this baked desert with that's just nothing but
you
death.
can have some great image of him just riding back to Carthage, you know, in the distance.
And he's alone.
Figuring, yeah, exactly, in the vast empty desert with Carthage in the distance, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's quite like Jesus Christ, and this is the end for Hannibal. And
and the gatekeeper says, "So, how did it go then?"
yeah, exactly. Well, not as good as I was hoping. So after that, Scipio gives Carthage remarkably light terms given the scale of the war, doesn't he?
I don't know that it was actually in fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't in Scipio's authority to dictate the terms personally himself. A lot of people were scrutinizing him. Cato, one of his major political enemies, was with him as a scrutineer, and even during that campaign was questioning him over budget and so forth, and suggesting that he'd embezzled money or the like. Yes, there were an awful lot of very powerful people in Rome, and better connected and older. Scipio was still reasonably young, so I don't think he got to call the shots there. A lot of people were quite jealous of the fact that he was elected as consul for so many terms, and he got command of his own legions and got to choose which legions he got command rather than having them allotted, which was the usual method. And he was given loads and loads of special concessions, which they were very jealous of and wary of. And so I think a lot of people just went, "Oh yeah, well done, Scipio, well done, thank you for here's a laurel wreath, go fine. Well, that's all right. We'll take over here. You're young, you don't understand this. This is old man talk. We'll
right, okay, so the terms, whoever was dictating the terms, then I was under the impression that Scipio had some control over this. But okay, so whoever dictated the terms, they weren't that stringent, were they really?
No, I suppose not. But they did. I mean, in terms of territory, they lost all the islands in the Mediterranean, and they lost Spain. In terms of territory, it was. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
When they're not confined to Africa.
Pretty much, yeah. So that's a major loss. But no, it wasn't anything like what happened after the Third Punic War, where they said, right, Carthage has got to be destroyed, and let's just raise the place.
Well, didn't they offer to move? Didn't they say you've got to move Carthage away from the sea? Wasn't that the condition before taking it?
This is the Third Punic War.
In the Third Punic War, they were making ridiculous demands, like disarm the city, and then no, you've got to move the entire city inland by 10 miles or something. And the Carthaginians were just like, no, that's ridiculous. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, essentially the third one was utterly draconian. But yes, you could say that there was a lighter touch than you might imagine. But then again, they had lost the war. They had lost all their colonies and territories. Rome had gained hugely from the war, and didn't want to have to try to take and hold down North Africa as well.
True.
And they did stop them building a navy, supposedly.
Didn't work, they did it.
But yes, and yet there was a third
Punic
War.
No, that was a bit of a foregone conclusion, though, wasn't it? The Third Punic War.
Yeah, I don't think there's a book in that.
No, I don't think there is as well. But yeah, I was just always amazed. It's like, right, okay, you're confined to Africa, you've lost, but it's like, okay, well, that's really not as bad as it could have been. They could have probably forced Carthage to be some kind of subject city, rather than not. I mean, they probably could have demanded more harsh terms, I think. But I just find that to be an interesting quirk, that after, and the horrors that the Carthaginians through Hannibal inflicted on the Romans, and it's like, right, just stay in Africa. It's like, could have been a lot worse, And the Carthaginians ended up paying off the war indemnity pretty quickly, didn't they?
Yes, but that was much to the embarrassment of the Romans. The amount of money the Romans made the Carthaginians pay was staggeringly vast, and they thought, ha, that'll show them. And it was they were actually against, because the Carthaginians actually paid it off early.
Yeah.
and a lot early as well.
Yes.
It was meant to keep the whole city in crippling financial debt for a couple of generations, and then I forget how many years, not that many years later, they've paid us it, and they actually didn't want to allow the Carthaginians to pay the debt off early. Whoops.
Yeah, because it kept them in subservience, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting thing, and so yeah, after the war, then, how's Hannibal reacted to in Carthage? I mean, there must be a lot of people in Carthage who hate him for bringing this on them.
Well, they elected him to high office, and he governed for quite some while, apparently very competently. So he had enough supporters for that to be possible. So they couldn't have all hated him, I think.
Oh no, I meant some on the aristocracy.
He had his enemies, certainly, and
yes.
he left. He got out of Carthage, as did Scipio from Rome. And Scipio, we don't actually have his tomb; it hasn't survived. But according to history, it said on it, "Cursed city, you shall not have even my bones."
Yeah, isn't that?
He was meant to be buried in Rome.
Well, do you want to tell us why exactly Scipio ended up declaring that Rome wouldn't even get his bones?
Well, after the war, he was investigated for all sorts of things, for fraud and a huge amount of political jealousy. There's an episode which I think will go into the book because it's such a great episode for setting up Scipio's character, where he receives the Holy Mother Stone. Do you know about this one?
Remind me.
Okay. The Romans are thrown into a religious panic, and they're looking around for every kind of prophecy they can get their hands on, and someone comes up with a prophecy that the best man in Rome shall receive the Holy Mother Stone, and that this will save the day somehow. And then they have to consult the augurs and say, well, what the hell does this Mother Stone, what does this mean? And they say, this will be an actual physical stone that exists in a temple way out east. So they send out ships and delegates to get this stone and bring it back. But then, of course, whilst it's on the way back, who's the best man in Rome? They got that. Whoever does this, according to will be the best man in Rome who receives it. So
it has to be Scipio, surely. I mean,
but does it?
Well, he won the war against Hannibal.
No. This is long before that.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
He hasn't beaten Hannibal yet. He hasn't gone against Hannibal yet.
Well, then, yeah, good question.
Who the hell knows? So who? And loads of people want to be the best man in Rome, but also the Romans have a terrifying hatred of anyone who can set himself up as king. The word king was an insult in ancient Rome.
Yeah.
You called someone a king, that wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It meant tyrant, dangerous tyrant. So they had an election, and who gets elected but Publius Cornelius Scipio, the dead one, not Scipio. Scipio's dead dad they elect as the best man in Rome.
Not terribly useful.
How weird is that? But why? Because he can't physically receive the stone.
Yeah, exactly.
So someone will have to do it on his behalf, and who will that be? Will that be Publius Cornelius Scipio, his son?
It'd have to be.
Well, yeah, but presumably, one interpretation of this is that they were sort of trying to elect him without electing him. That to set someone up as the greatest man in Rome who's actually alive would be something that was just something they couldn't stomach. So how about we pick someone who's dead and then get someone else to do it on his behalf, say his son? But maybe, if you are Scipio and you are religious, this seriously goes to your head. Can you imagine doing that and not thinking that you are now a man of destiny?
Yeah, which is way more interesting. Yeah, that has to go through it.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does have to be that way. And absolutely. And it's way more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's through all the political intrigue that Scipio ends up just leaving Rome. Where does he go out of Rome?
I think he's in Campania when he dies.
Right. Okay. So not too far.
No, but out of Rome.
Right. Okay.
Retire to your villa and write your memoirs, which did not survive. But it's okay because his son wrote a biography of him. That didn't survive either.
Oh, fucking hell.
Nothing No, his version of the war doesn't survive. His version doesn't survive. His son's version doesn't survive. And all the other historians who wrote stuff based on that, none of it survives. And if you like conspiracy theories, maybe there's one there. You know, maybe there's a post-Scipio conspiracy to wipe his version of events because he perhaps knew that Hannibal was an honourable guy or something, but some unstomachable fact.
Hey, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility either. There are plenty of times throughout history where people who've tried to eradicate a narrative from someone else's perspective. So I mean, that's not an unlikely thing. But it's a damn shame. It's like Pyrrhus of Epirus had written a series of treatises on war, and they didn't survive. And this guy, you would have wanted to have heard what he had to say about ancient warfare from his personal perspective. And it's honestly, it breaks my heart that we'll probably never see these. It's like.
And according to Hannibal, Pyrrhus was a better general than he was.
Exactly. And if he had beaten Scipio, he would have put himself first. But yeah, okay, so that's really fascinating. So Hannibal then goes out to the east after the self-exile from Carthage. Why does he exile himself from Carthage?
Well, I would be putting a spin on it there. I mean, we could say that he's a soldier, and that's all he feels comfortable doing, and there's more soldering to do. Another interpretation is that he's being employed against Rome, and that he's taken this vow to just keep fighting against Rome. Personally, I don't particularly like that idea, but it's one that appeals to a lot of people.
But it doesn't sound like it would be within Hannibal's character. I think he'd be pragmatic and understand that he'd been defeated, and that was it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by the whole oath to be a permanent enemy of Rome thing in the first place. It sounds very post hoc. It sounds like the legend of the birth of Christ or something, where
it's setting up the mortal enemies. Yeah, it's a bit too pat, isn't it?
But anyway, we have a third person with us.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm sorry, I do apologize. So Chris, what sort of research are you doing into the? Because I mean, surely you're gonna have to learn about like all sorts of various different styles of ancient architecture.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that a lot of it doesn't exist. So, yeah.
How do you plan? Most of it doesn't exist. In fact, almost all of it doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's definitely tricky. I've got a massive stack of books in front of me, it's going to be tricky. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm going to do a road trip, and I'm going to try and hit these locations, like kind of retrace his route, and photograph as much as I can, and just to kind of get a sense of the lay of the land, and like, oh, this is what trees look like, this is what this plant life looks like.
But the thing is, it's going to be completely different, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I read some of the stuff that I've read. It's like people say, I mean, the vegetation itself is going to be similar. I really don't think that it's. I mean, yeah, you're going to have some shifting of shorelines and this kind of thing, but I don't think it's going to be that crazy.
I guess the mountains will stay.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it's like those hills are still there.
Yeah, they'll still be there. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love ancient architecture. One of the things I love about the ancient world is the architecture, because it's obviously different wherever you go. But I mean, I assume that most of it's just going to have to be kind of artistic interpretation, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of just looking at similar civilizations that are around, and kind of just, you sort of do have to do a patchwork at some point, and taking motifs of stuff that's surviving that you see in pottery and decorative stuff that's still around, and you can kind of see, well, how they would maybe incorporate that into their architecture and this kind of stuff, like say in Carthage, like what does that look like?
Well, I remember reading a description of some of the buildings there, and apparently they had 6-story blocks of flats. And this is one of the things people always forget about, like the classical world, is it was heavily urbanized. Because you're building within walls, so you had to build upwards.
Yeah, and I mean their harbor, like the harbor there is really like iconic, and I mean, so I've got like a lot of like reconstructions of these kinds of things, and but yeah, it's beyond just like, I mean, yeah, it's the architecture, it's the landscapes, it's also the physical, like the gear.
I was going to come to that next, actually.
The gear is a good thing too.
The costumes, or however you want to describe the way they.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some helmets. I've got
what's that? is that a Roman helmet or?
Yeah, like a Montefiore.
Montefiore, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, like just different.
Okay, let's go through it. Let's go through it, because as far as I understand, the Romans are going to be wearing, I assumed it was iron helmets, chainmail, and then probably some padding underneath, with a large shield and a gladius. But did they have? It wasn't the gladius we think of when we think of the Romans, was it?
No, it's a little bit different. It's kind of here. I've got it's like a gladius Hispanius, I think.
Hispaniensis.
And
I thought they got that after this war.
No. Broadly speaking, no. They had the Gladius Hispaniensis had come in by this period, although whether it was completely standard at the start of the war seems to be in doubt. But the Gladius was in use. I'm relying largely on the research done by others. There are lots of books. We've got one of the first things we did months ago was buy all the ospreys.
Yeah.
And they definitely plumped for the Hispaniensis short sword for this war.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, it is very similar. Like it's slightly longer, and there's a very slight leafy bit on the end. But really, I mean, yeah, it's
not a big deal. I mean, no.
Yeah, and I mean also too, like people have to realize like these are drawings. It makes me think of that, like this is not a pipe picture.
Yeah.
It's like they are drawings of these things. So everything is sort of an approximation.
Yeah, but, it's not the world's biggest deal. I was just curious.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that you're gonna.
But it will be accurate. It will be accurate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Even if it's not the world's, again, not a big deal. But I think I assume you're gonna have to have a fairly consistent color scheme for the Romans, just for the readers, if nothing else. Because the Carthaginians weren't like, they didn't have a uniform, surely.
Yeah, I mean, with the Carthaginians, you have, kind of the different unit types. Like the Celts, obviously, are going to be very
Celt-looking.
Yeah, I don't want to say the word clownish, but like they are fairly
bright colors and whatnot. Apparently.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they are really kind of a crazy-looking group of people. If you saw a line of them, I mean, so with the Romans in a way will have obviously that more like kind of not imperial, but unified,
standardized.
Standardized kit.
Yeah.
Whereas you have Balearic slingers, and you've got like Numidian cavalry, and you have like just this hodgepodge of variation on Hannibal's side, which is really, really interesting. And one of the cool things too, like in the campaign, in the Kickstarter campaign, is like we had this one upgrade where people could send us their picture, and I'll fit them into the book somewhere. And it's great having just a variety of people. And
I've paid for that, so I'd like to be a
right. Yeah, so you'll be in there. And it's great because you have we've got like some African guys and a lot of like Spanish people, a lot of very serious looking gingers wanting to be Celts, and so it'll be really, really cool.
That's brilliant, man. That's really
great.
Cool. Yeah. That's really cool. Okay, so that's interesting because one of the things that it's one of the things that's always so iconic about it, isn't it? That the Carthaginians, they look like such a hodgepodge force.
Mm-hmm.
The Romans look like they in your mind, or at least how they sound portrayed, at least at the beginning of the war, as a much more sort of regular thing. So I really think that this is a sort of really amazing aesthetic appeal that the novel will have, because usually you're on the side of the well-disciplined, drilled guys, when you're on a story. But in this, I get the feeling that I'd be more on the side of Hannibal, because he's the one taking the gamble and taking the risks.
Yeah, I mean, and he's also, you're just naturally going to look at, the evil imperial Rome. Exactly. Like everybody's going to do that, and everybody's going to automatically say, okay, I want to cheer for the underdog, obviously. And but yeah, it's really great. The contrasts, the contrasts are amazing with.
So I'm just laughing at the underdog thing, So we'll send the Scipio against. Oh, he's been defeated. Oh, well, Trebia. Oh, he's been defeated and slaughtered us. Okay, Chetemini. Oh, he defeated us and slaughtered us. Oh, can I? Oh, he defeated us and slaughtered us. Yeah,
but
come
on
on,
paper,
underdog.
yeah, but on paper it looks like he's the underdog. You know?
Okay.
Well, right. It's like the civilized. Well, I guess it depends. I think it's from more like our perspective of this moment, of this time in history. We would look back at anybody challenging Rome would be perceived as an underdog. I think just from our own perspective of kind of media, the zeitgeist, Hollywood, all of this stuff, we would think that anybody challenging kind of the might of Rome, even though Rome back then wasn't what
the power.
Yeah, true, but interesting. According to Livy, Alexander the Great had never heard of Rome, but he knew of Carthage. Indeed, it said that he didn't, because he conquered Egypt, but he didn't carry on to take out Carthage. And the Carthaginians themselves said, "Oh no, he didn't take us on because we were too powerful." And that's why he didn't
say that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But, there could have been something in it. They were a major power at the time, and he had also ambitions, of course, further east. But the point is, that he knew of Carthage, and would have respected it. And supposedly, we don't have proof of this. Supposedly, he'd never heard of Rome, just some village somewhere in Western Italy. Who would bother conquering Italy?
To be fair, at the time, why would he? I mean, he took on Persia. That was, far more impressive than Rome at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So why would anyone care? They would have been barbarians. I mean, Pyrrhus thought that the Romans were going to be barbarians. He turns up and they're all in disciplined order, working productively. And he's like, oh, these don't seem like barbarians to me. And he barely beat them a bunch of times. So I can believe that Alexander wouldn't. But what was I saying?
Sorry, no, you went. Sorry, I interrupted Chris. Very sorry, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
What was that? I forget what
the Carthaginians and the Underlings. Oh no, that's what I was
I was going to say something about contrast, like just something like say the Numidian cavalry is such a great contrast to the Roman cavalry at the time. Just visually that image is so.
Wouldn't they have had like leopard skins and stuff on there?
Yeah, possibly. It just like I don't know if they. Wow, I mean, as far as what kind of gear they would like what the saddles were like, or if they even kind of had saddles, or what the bridles were like on the horses and stuff. But it's just a very different group of people, and that's the beauty of, say, just the Hannibal side, is that it really is this hodgepodge.
And looking at other mercenary armies that have been rich, successful mercenary armies for a long time, mercenaries tend to dress differently from the normal population, and they tend to express a lot of their wealth through the way they dress. So it's quite possible that after 15 years of being a mercenary in Italy, looting Italy, they may have looked like landsknechts or something.
That's exactly it.
They may have been absolutely outlandish.
With giant cod pieces, yeah.
But didn't they end up using a lot of captured Roman equipment? So they,
absolutely,
yeah.
After Chetemini, most of them were indistinguishable from a distance from Romans.
Well, that's like a bit of a problem from an artistic point of view, though, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
You probably can't do that, can you?
No, I really. I mean.
Yeah, you're gonna have to fudge it.
It's just messy for the reader, and it's just messy. So yeah.
I mean, there are loads of ways around that.
Well, yeah, and also too, I think that if somebody, like, if you had a Roman shield, you would, you'd make it your own. Yeah, you wouldn't, you'd put your own images on and stuff like this.
Yeah, so just even in the midst of battle, you'd want to be able to surely glance at your fellows and see at least what color their shields are or something. Just something. Because I mean, I can think of at least one example of where the Athenians ended up fighting themselves because they got confused on a battlefield, and they didn't have proper uniform. They just had, everyone had their own shield and their own decorated shield, and so, you certainly wouldn't. I mean, you couldn't have just gone in looking like the enemy. Mm-hmm. That'd have been crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And visually, it's a bad idea.
And
definitely for the graphic novel, it's a terrible.
Yeah.
I think there are some wonderful opportunities with the graphic novel that are actually some things which would be difficult. I was trying to think of things that you can do in a graphic novel that are actually difficult or impossible to do in films. A lot of these battles happen at dawn. A lot of the main actions happen at dawn and dusk. And in Hollywood movies, though you may get a scene involving a conversation between two characters that can be shot really quickly, that they can shoot at dawn and dusk, you never get big stuff happening at dawn and dusk, because it's too expensive. If you've got casts of thousands of extras in costume, you need to be able to shoot them all day. You can't shoot them for half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening and then say, okay, come back tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everything happens at this sort of nondescript broad daylight.
Yeah.
But we can, like Yosemite, the morning mists.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, the weather is also like, I mean, that's a character. But like weather, time of day, all of these things are all complementary to each other to bring out.
So, okay, then how exactly do you draw? I mean, do you sort of draw by hand and then add digital effects, or?
Usually the way that I do everything is I do all my layouts digitally. I've been using a thing called Manga Studio Pro, which is just it's a great little program. It feels really nice when you're using it to draw. And so I draw everything out in Manga Studio, and then I print it out. It sounds kind of weird, but I print out the page quite large in just 8.5 by 11 kind of sheets. In inches, that is. And then from there, I put it on a light table, and then I ink it. So each page is approximately, I guess, this large, I suppose. And then I scan that in after the inks are done, which are in kind of like brushes and pen, ink brushes, that kind of stuff. Then I scan it in, and then the coloring itself is done in Photoshop with some kind of, there'll be some watercolor sort of washes that will be added and this kind of thing. So. Yeah, Photoshop is definitely used in the final stages for, I mean, because everything's set up.
I'm not trying to cast aspersions on digital art or anything like that. Obviously, surely,
Yeah, but there is something that, I mean, personally, I really like having, like, especially with something like this, it kind of needs that organic thing going on, and so having it physically drawn and inked on actual paper, to me, it just your brain recognizes that this is a real thing.
You can probably tell and it's probably just down to things like mistakes that you make.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like the happy accidents and the happy screw ups that make it look alive a little bit, because that pure 100% perfection is really artificial.
Sterile.
Yeah, it's really sterile. It's really boring, and just having I don't want to say flaws, but having just that human touch to it, it really helps. It just feels real.
If it was like Cyberpunk or something, where it's everyone's wearing cool shades and they're shooting with cyborg arms that are shiny and gorgeous. Yeah, I could.
It just like lens flares everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But with something like this, you want it to have a sort of earthy feel to it.
Yeah.
You don't want it to look perfect.
Yeah, for sure. And then and one of the things too, I mean, the beauty of having original pages is you can sell them. so in the Kickstarter, one of the rewards is like to buy the pages. So that's another benefit. But yeah, it's also like I just like I mean, most of the time, most of the work that I do, like the drudgery, the day-to-day bullshit, pay the bill stuff, is sitting like at a Cintiq drawing digitally. So it's nice to be able to like work on something that's kind of getting dirty, brush and ink, that kind of stuff. I love that sort of stuff.
Cool, that's really cool. Okay then, so is there anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I would just like to mention we're doing an Ask Me Anything on Reddit tomorrow.
Ooh, okay.
So that's going to be at I should be ready for this, shouldn't I? 3 o'clock, I think, tomorrow.
Is that GMT?
If you go to GMT, if you go to Reddit and go to IAMA, IAMA is one of the subreddits where the Ask Me Anythings happen, and it is 3 o'clock tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It is. Okay, 3 o'clock tomorrow. Phew.
Right. Okay. I'll put a link to that in the description for you.
Oh,
there you go.
That's all right.
And I guess if I was to plug anything, I would, or want to mention anything, it's just the Kickstarter. Go check it out, because the great thing is that it's been really successful, and our next stretch goal that I really hope we hit. What we're going to do is we're going to do our In Search of Hannibal book, but we're going to do like a compendium, I guess, called Tales of the Punic Wars. And it's going to be a collection of short stories that we couldn't quite get into the main book. So we're at the point now where we're luckily able to do a whole second book, basically. And which is really cool, because somehow we have 2 books now, and I mean, it means I get to work on this a little bit longer. But
well, I mean, there's no getting around how successful you've been. You asked for what, 25,000 euros, and now you have about 95,000 euros. So you're doing particularly well. I mean,
yeah.
I backed you, so in case anyone's wondering, I've got my pledge there because I want a copy of this. So,
So I mean, I think it's going to be really cool, and. So yeah, I just hope that everybody goes and checks it out, and yeah.
Cool. Okay. Anything you'd like to add, Lloyd, apart from that?
Well, it's all very daunting because now I've got to write the flipping thing. The pressure's on because I've made videos now about how I've been thinking about the plot, and so I really I really no excuse not to come up with a cracker of a plot. But the trouble with plots.
The trouble with plots.
The trouble with this sort of task is that there's never a point at which you can say, right, I've perfected it. It cannot be improved now. There just comes a point where you have to say, oh, I'm happy enough to walk away, or because I've got to hand this to Chris before he can draw it.
Yeah.
And it's so I'm a bit daunted by the responsibility. But one of the main reasons I took this on in the first place was the challenge. How often does someone, put a challenge like this in front of you? Here, I would like you to, in a very short space of time, get used to a new medium, the graphic novel, and tell possibly the most complicated story imaginable. Off you go.
Yes.
Good luck.
But it's going to be good. It is going to be good. I mean, and really, story is story at the end of the day, and it is. Yeah, it's a graphic novel, but I mean, I've worked in comics. I get the medium really well, and I think that it's like, I mean, if you can just, whether it's a poem or a movie or a comic or whatever, good story is good story, and I think that's it. As long as you nail that, then we're off to the races. So we've already got a great foundation with the whole Hannibal thing. So it's just finding the juice and squeezing it.
Fantastic, and congratulations on doing so well on the Kickstarter.
Thanks.
I'm really looking forward to it. When is it expected to be done? Because it's not going to be soon,
like 7 days. So everybody go now. This is a call to action.
I meant the novel being
17.
Oh,
what you said. We probably, in fact, almost certainly won't get Tales of the Punic Wars out by then. But the main book should be out by December 17, assuming everything goes perfectly.
Yeah. Which it will, obviously.
Of course. What could go wrong?
Exactly.
But seriously, congratulations, guys. I'm really looking forward to the project. And yeah, thanks for coming on and talking. This has been fun. I know I'm monopolising your time quite a lot there, Lloyd. But I'm a big fan of your channel. I watch a lot of your videos, and I like the way you think about these things. So I wanted to put a few questions to you to see what your interpretation was. Thank you for indulging me in that, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on channel. It was going to be an hour. We've gone for 2.5 hours.
Oh, I didn't realize. Sorry. It is getting a bit dark, isn't it?
You see now how the time just flies by when Chris and I have... Actually, I don't think we've ever managed a short Skype session, have we?
No, I think every conversation we have, it's about 3 to 4 hours every time. I don't think we've ever had a short conversation, ever. So, yeah.
That's a good sign.
So we can expect some sort of dramatic, creative difference in about 6 months' time that will cause you to break up and...
Well, like I said, I'm gonna that conversation about the...
If you put the helicopter shot in, it's over.
That's exactly it.
You need it. I swear to God. You need. I swear. I promise. It'll be good. I swear to you, man.
I think it is so hilarious that you brought this
I
up.
don't know, but we don't want to have to print two versions: the helicopter shot version and the non-helicopter shot version. That's an unnecessary expense.
We'll have to make a director's cut where your version is just kind of watered down and a little less interesting without the zing.
Cool. Anyway, so thank you so much. Best of luck with the project, and thanks to everyone who was watching. Take it easy, everyone.